The desert is still. There is a kind of quiet here that feels deep and steady, as if it has been resting for a very long time. The sand lies in soft, endless shapes, gently curved by winds that move slowly across the land. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels loud. Even the air seems to move with care. Before anything else begins, there is this silence. It is the kind of silence that invites listening. And if one listens long enough, very gently, very patiently, the past begins to speak not in words, but in small, ordinary details. The way a door opens. The way footsteps settle into sand. The way water is poured into a clay bowl at the start of the day. This is where the story begins. Not with kings or battles or great events, but with a village. A quiet desert village in Egypt, resting far from busy roads, far from noise, held gently between the wide sky and the warm earth. The village does not appear suddenly. It reveals itself slowly. At first, it is only a faint shape along the horizon. A soft gathering of low walls, almost the same color as the sand. As the light of morning grows, the shapes become clearer. Small homes stand close together, their flat roofs catching the first pale gold of the rising sun. These homes are made by hand. Mud, straw, water, and time pressed together, shaped carefully, then left to dry under the steady heat of the desert sun. Each wall holds the touch of the people who built it. Each corner is slightly uneven, not from mistake, but from the simple truth that everything here is made slowly. Nothing is rushed. The village has been here for many years. No one marks the exact beginning. It has grown little by little, as families stayed, as children grew, as new walls were built beside old ones. Life here follows a rhythm that is easy to miss at first. It does not announce itself. It does not change quickly. It repeats, gently, day after day, like the soft movement of wind across the dunes. Morning comes quietly. Before the sun fully rises, there is a faint coolness in the air. The night has not completely left yet. The sky holds a soft gray-blue color, and the stars begin to fade one by one. Inside one of the homes, a man wakes. He does not rise quickly. There is no alarm, no sudden movement. He simply opens his eyes as he has done every morning for many years. For a moment, he stays still, listening. There is almost nothing to hear. A distant breeze. The faint shifting of sand against a wall. Somewhere far away, perhaps the soft sound of an animal stirring. He sits up slowly. The floor beneath him is cool. The walls around him hold the memory of the night's lower temperature. These homes are built to protect from heat, to hold coolness for as long as possible. Even in the desert, there are small comforts. He reaches for a simple garment, made of light fabric, worn loose to allow the air to move freely. Every detail has a purpose here, shaped by years of living under the same sun. Outside, the village is beginning to wake. A door opens quietly. Then another. There is no rush. No crowd. Each movement is spaced, gentle, almost careful, as if the morning itself should not be disturbed. A woman steps out into a small courtyard. The ground beneath her feet is smooth, packed earth. She carries a clay jar, its surface cool to the touch. Inside, there is water precious, always precious in a place like this. Water defines the rhythm of the village. It shapes the day, the work, the movement of people. It determines where life gathers and how it continues. Every drop is used with care, never wasted, always respected. She pours a small amount into a shallow bowl. The sound is soft. A quiet, steady trickle. It echoes slightly against the walls, then fades back into silence. Nearby, a child stirs. He wakes slowly, turning toward the faint light that now touches the doorway. His eyes open halfway, then close again for just a moment, as if holding on to the last pieces of sleep. There is no urgency waiting for him. Only another day, much like the one before. As the sun begins to rise higher, the color of the village changes. What was once gray-blue becomes warm gold. The walls glow softly, the edges of buildings becoming more defined. Shadows stretch long across the ground, thin and quiet. The air begins to warm. Not quickly, not harshly, but steadily. In the distance, beyond the cluster of homes, the land continues without end. Sand, low shrubs, and here and there, the faint sign of a path worn by feet that have traveled the same way many times. These paths connect everything. They lead to water sources, to small fields where the earth allows something to grow, to neighboring places that exist just beyond the horizon. A man walks along one of these paths now. His steps are unhurried. The sand shifts softly beneath his feet, leaving shallow marks that will soon be smoothed away by wind. He carries a simple tool, worn from use, held easily in his hand. Work here is not separate from life. It is part of the same slow rhythm. There is no clear beginning or end. Only movement from one task to another, guided by light, by temperature, by need. Back in the village, smoke begins to rise from a small opening in one of the homes. It is thin and light, barely visible against the brightening sky. Inside, a fire has been started. The wood is dry, gathered carefully over time. It burns quietly, producing just enough heat for cooking. A flat piece of bread is placed over the warmth, its surface slowly changing color, releasing a soft, familiar scent. Food here is simple. Flour, water, a bit of salt. Sometimes herbs. Sometimes dates. Always made with care, always shared. The smell drifts out into the courtyard. It mixes with the warming air, with the faint dryness of the desert, with the stillness that has not yet fully left the morning. A few voices can now be heard. Low, calm, unhurried. People greet each other not with excitement, but with quiet recognition. They have seen each other every day, and yet each morning still begins with a small acknowledgement. The village is fully awake now, though it does not feel busy. It feels steady. Everything moves at a pace that matches the land itself. As the sun climbs higher, the light becomes stronger. The shadows grow shorter. The warmth becomes more noticeable, pressing gently against the walls, the ground, the air itself. Soon, the day will reach its quiet peak, when movement slows again, when people retreat into shaded spaces, when the heat asks for stillness. But that moment is not yet here. For now, the village continues its slow beginning. A beginning that has happened countless times before. And will happen again, in the same gentle way. Without change. Without hurry. Only rhythm. Only time. And the quiet life of a desert village, unfolding one small moment at a time. Say next when you're ready for part 2. Next part 2. The morning continues without interruption. The light grows a little stronger, though it still feels gentle, spreading slowly across the village walls and narrow pathways. The air carries a faint warmth now, touching the skin in a quiet, steady way. Nothing arrives suddenly here. Even the sun, bright and constant, seems to take its time. The village moves forward in small, familiar motions. In one shaded courtyard, The woman who prepared the morning bread now sits on a low stool. The clay oven beside her still holds a soft heat. She turns the flat bread carefully, watching its surface change color, her hands moving with a quiet certainty learned over many years. There is no need to hurry. The fire will do its work in its own time. Nearby, a second piece of dough rests beneath a cloth. It waits patiently. Waiting is a natural part of life here. The land itself teaches it. Seeds wait beneath dry soil. Water waits deep below the ground. Even the wind waits, gathering itself before it moves across the open desert. The child who woke earlier now sits close to the doorway. He watches everything. His eyes follow the movements of the woman, the soft rise of smoke, the slow passing of light across the ground. There is curiosity in him, but it is quiet curiosity. He does not interrupt. He simply observes, learning without being told. A little farther away, two men stand near a low wall. They speak in calm, measured voices. Their conversation is not long, and it is not urgent. It moves like the morning itself, steady, thoughtful, without sharp edges. They speak of the day ahead, of small tasks that need attention. A tool that must be repaired. A path that has become uneven. A container that should be filled before the heat grows stronger. These are simple things. But in the village, simple things matter. They shape the day. They shape the rhythm. They keep life moving in its quiet, continuous way. Beyond the homes, at the edge of the village, a narrow path leads toward a small stretch of cultivated land. It is not large, and it does not stand out against the wide desert, but it is cared for with great attention. A man walks there now, the same one who left earlier. His steps remain unhurried, but they are steady. He knows the ground beneath his feet. He knows where the sand is firm and where it shifts more easily. His body moves without effort, guided by habit more than thought. When he reaches the field, he pauses. The soil here is darker than the surrounding land, holding a small amount of moisture. It has been shaped carefully, tended over time, protected as much as possible from the dryness that surrounds it. Low plants grow in quiet rows. They are not lush, and they do not grow quickly, but they persist. Each leaf holds a soft shade of green, a quiet contrast to the pale tones of the desert. The man kneels down. He touches the soil lightly, feeling its texture, its temperature. This simple gesture tells him much. Whether the ground holds enough moisture. Whether the plants are comfortable. Whether the day's heat will be too much. There are no instruments here. Only hands, eyes, and long experience. He begins his work slowly. A small adjustment to the soil. A careful removal of a dry leaf. A quiet check of each plant. Nothing is done quickly. Each movement has a purpose, and each purpose is carried out with care. Back in the village, the sun has now climbed higher. The warmth becomes more noticeable. Shadows shrink closer to the walls, gathering beneath doorways and along the edges of buildings. People begin to move with a slightly different rhythm now. Still calm, still steady, but more aware of the coming heat. A group of women gathers near a shared space between homes. They sit together, close enough to speak without raising their voices. Their work is simple but constant, preparing food, mending fabric, shaping small items used in daily life. Their hands move as they talk. The conversation flows gently, without urgency. There are pauses, moments where no one speaks, and yet the silence does not feel empty. It feels comfortable, like something that belongs. A soft breeze passes through the village. It carries with it the dry scent of sand and the faint trace of smoke from the morning fires. It brushes against the walls, slips through open doorways, and moves on without leaving a mark. The breeze does not cool the air much, but it brings movement. And movement, even small, is enough. In one of the homes, an older man rests against the inner wall. The space is dim, protected from the direct light of the sun. The walls here are thick, holding back much of the heat. It is one of the quietest places in the village. He sits with his eyes partially closed. Not fully asleep, not fully awake. Just resting. His breathing is slow and even. The stillness around him seems to settle deeper, as if the room itself is sharing in his quiet pause. Outside, a young boy walks along the narrow path between homes. He carries a small container, careful not to spill what is inside. His steps are measured, his attention focused. The path is uneven in places, shaped by many footsteps over many years. He reaches a doorway and stops. A soft knock. A quiet exchange. Then he turns and walks back the way he came, his task complete. The village continues like this. Small actions. Quiet movements. Gentle exchanges. Nothing stands apart. Everything connects. As the sun moves closer to its highest point, the light becomes stronger, more direct. The air grows heavier, pressing gently against the skin, reminding everyone of the need to slow down. This is the time when the village begins to soften its activity. Not completely, but gradually. People move into shaded areas. Work that can wait is set aside. Tasks that must continue are done more slowly, with more pauses. The rhythm changes again. It becomes quieter. More inward. The sounds of the morning fade into softer tones. Voices lower. Footsteps become less frequent. Even the animals settle into stillness, finding small patches of shade wherever they can. In the courtyard, the woman finishes her work. The bread is ready. She places it aside, covering it lightly. It will be shared soon, in a simple meal that does not need ceremony. Food here is not about display. It is about nourishment, about continuity, about the quiet comfort of something familiar. The child who watched earlier now sits closer. He waits. There is patience in his waiting. He has learned it without being told. The sun continues its steady climb. The village, in response, becomes stiller. Not silent, but calm in a deeper way. The kind of calm that comes not from absence, but from balance. Heat and shade. Movement and rest. Sound and quiet. Everything held gently together. And as the day reaches toward its warmest hours, the village does not resist. It simply adjusts. It slows. It breathes. And it continues, as it always has, in its quiet, steady way. Next part 3. The day settles into its warm center. The sun now stands high above the village, almost directly overhead, casting a bright and steady light that leaves very little shadow behind. The walls of the homes hold the heat, and the open spaces between them feel wide and still. This is the quietest part of the day. Not because life has stopped, but because it has softened. Movement becomes slower. Voices grow even gentler. Even the wind seems to rest, as if it too understands that this is a time for stillness. Inside the homes, the air feels cooler. The thick mud brick walls protect the interior spaces, keeping them dim and calm. Light enters only in small amounts, slipping through narrow openings and doorways, drawing soft shapes on the floor. In one of these rooms, the older man remains where he was. He has not moved much. His breathing is steady, slow, and deep. His hands rest loosely in his lap. Around him, the quiet feels almost complete. It is not an empty quiet, but a full one, filled with the soft presence of the room itself, the faint scent of earth, the stillness of the walls, the gentle passage of time. This kind of rest is part of the rhythm. It is not separate from the day. It belongs to it. Outside, the village pathways are nearly empty. The ground, warmed by hours of sunlight, gives off a soft heat. The air above it shimmers slightly, bending the light in ways that feel slow and distant. A few figures move through this brightness, but they do so with care. A woman crosses from one shaded doorway to another, her steps measured, her head slightly lowered against the light. A man adjusts a covering stretched between two walls, creating a larger patch of shade where others can sit later. These are small adjustments. But they matter. They make the heat easier to live with. They shape the space in quiet, thoughtful ways. At the edge of the village, the small cultivated field rests under the same strong sun. The man who worked there earlier has stepped away for now. The plants remain, their leaves still, their roots holding on to what little moisture the soil provides. They endure the heat without movement. There is no choice but to wait. Waiting, again, becomes part of the day. Time passes slowly here. Not in measured units, not in marked hours, but in the gentle shift of light, in the gradual change of temperature, in the feeling of the air as it moves or does not move across the skin. In one shaded courtyard, a group has gathered. They sit close to the walls, where the shadow is deepest. Some lean back, eyes half closed. Others rest their hands in their laps, letting the stillness settle over them. There is little conversation. A few quiet words, spoken softly, then silence again. No one feels the need to fill the space with sound. The silence itself is enough. A small clay cup is passed from one person to another. Inside, there is water. It is not cold, but it is refreshing in its own way. Each person drinks slowly, taking only what they need, then passing it along. The act is simple, but it carries a quiet understanding. Everything here is shared. Everything is measured. Nothing is taken without thought. In another part of the village, a young boy lies on a woven mat. His eyes are closed now. The heat has drawn him into a light sleep. His breathing is soft, almost unnoticeable. One hand rests loosely by his side, the other near his face, as if he drifted off without realizing it. Sleep comes easily at this time of day. Not deep, not long, but enough to soften the body, to ease the weight of the heat. Nearby, a woman sits with her back against the wall. She watches the boy for a moment, then lets her gaze drift outward, toward the open courtyard, where the sunlight presses gently against the ground. Her hands are still. For now, there is nothing to do. And that, too, is part of life here. There are moments when work pauses. Moments when the day simply holds still. Far above, the sky remains clear. A pale, endless blue, without cloud or change. It stretches in every direction, untouched, constant, offering no sign of movement. The village rests beneath it, small and quiet. Time continues to pass, though it feels almost suspended. Then, slowly, almost without notice, something begins to change. The light softens, just slightly. It is not a sudden shift. It does not announce itself. But the sharpness of the sun begins to ease. The air, while still warm, loses a small part of its intensity. This is the beginning of the afternoon's turn. It happens gently. So gently that it can be missed. But the people of the village feel it. They do not need to look at the sky to know. They sense it in the air, in the ground, in the quiet signals that come from long familiarity with this place. Movement returns, slowly. The woman in the courtyard shifts her position, adjusting the cloth beside her. Another person sits up, stretching slightly, as if waking from a half-sleep. The older man inside the home opens his eyes. He does not rise immediately. He simply sits for a moment, letting awareness return at its own pace. Outside, a door opens. Then another. The village begins to breathe again. Not quickly. Not all at once. But gradually, as the day moves forward. A man steps into the light, pausing at the edge of the shade. He looks out across the village, not searching for anything, just observing. The same homes. The same paths. The same quiet arrangement of life that has not changed. And yet, each time he looks, it feels new in a small way. Familiar, but never empty. The field at the edge of the village will soon need attention again. The animals will need water. The tools left earlier will be picked up once more. Life will continue, just as it did in the morning. But softer. Slower. Carried forward by the same steady rhythm. The boy on the mat stirs slightly. His eyes open halfway, then close again, then open once more. He sits up slowly, adjusting to the light, to the warmth, to the quiet sounds that are beginning to return. He does not rush to his feet. There is no need. He simply sits, listening. And in that listening, the village begins to take shape again around him. Footsteps, faint but present. Voices, low and calm. The soft movement of cloth, the quiet handling of tools, the gentle return of activity. The afternoon has begun. And with it, the village resumes its quiet life once more. Next part 4. The afternoon unfolds slowly, as if it has nowhere else to be. The light, once sharp and direct, now begins to soften in a quiet and steady way. It leans gently against the walls of the village, warming them without the same intensity as before. The air still holds heat, but it feels more breathable now, less pressing, easier to move through. This is the time when life returns in small steps. Not all at once, not with sudden energy, but with a gradual unfolding. A door opens. A figure steps out. A tool is lifted again, not hurriedly, but with quiet intention. The village begins to move. In the shaded courtyard, the group that had been resting now shifts into gentle activity. One woman rises, brushing a fine layer of dust from her garment. Another gathers the small items that had been set aside earlier. Their movements are calm, practiced, and unspoken. Nothing needs to be explained. Each person knows what the afternoon asks of them. The bread prepared in the morning is brought forward now. It is simple, flat, and lightly browned, with a soft texture that bends easily in the hand. A small portion is broken and passed from one to another. There is no formal gathering, no set place. The sharing happens where people already are. Food here moves quietly through the day. It appears, is shared, and disappears again without ceremony. The young boy, now fully awake, sits nearby. He accepts a small piece of bread, holding it carefully, as if it might break further if handled too quickly. He eats slowly, watching the others, listening to the soft rhythm of voices returning around him. His world is small, but full. Every detail carries meaning. Across the village, a man returns to the edge of the cultivated field. The sun, now slightly lower, casts longer shadows across the ground. The soil still holds warmth, but it is no longer harsh. He kneels once again, just as he did in the morning. His hands move through the soil. He adjusts small ridges, clears away bits of dry matter, checks the base of each plant. The work is not difficult, but it requires attention. It requires presence. There is no rushing this kind of care. Each plant is given a moment. Each moment is enough. Nearby, a narrow channel carries a small amount of water. It does not flow quickly. It moves in a slow, careful line, guided by shallow paths shaped into the earth. The man watches it for a moment, ensuring it reaches where it is needed, then gently redirects a small portion with his hand. Water follows the shape of the land. And the land is shaped by the hands of those who live with it. Back within the village, the pathways begin to fill again, though never crowded. A woman carries a bundle of fabric, its edges folded neatly. She walks with steady steps, her path familiar, her destination already known without needing thought. Two men pass each other near a corner. They pause briefly. A quiet greeting. A few soft words. Then they continue on their separate ways. These small exchanges form the fabric of the village. They are not long. They do not draw attention. But they connect everything. In one open space, partially shaded by a stretched cloth, a man sits with a simple tool in his hands. It shows signs of long use. The surface is worn smooth in places, marked by time and repetition. He studies it for a moment, then begins to make small repairs. His movements are careful. A slight adjustment here. A gentle tightening there. The sound is soft, barely more than a faint tap, a quiet scrape. It blends easily into the surrounding calm, becoming just another layer in the steady rhythm of the afternoon. Not far away, a few children gather. Their presence brings a different kind of movement. Still gentle, still quiet compared to distant places beyond the desert, but lighter, more fluid. They walk, pause, turn, and walk again, tracing small paths that exist only for them. There is no loud play. No sudden bursts of sound. Their energy moves in softer patterns, shaped by the same environment that shapes everything else here. One child traces a line in the sand with a small stick. Another follows, adding to it. The marks will not last long. The wind will come, or footsteps will pass, and the lines will disappear. But for now, they exist. And that is enough. The afternoon continues to stretch gently forward. The sky begins its slow transition, though it is still bright. The blue softens just slightly, hinting at the coming evening, though there is still time before that change fully arrives. The air carries a subtle shift. A hint of movement returns. A breeze, light and quiet, begins to pass through the village once more. It moves along the walls, through open spaces, across the ground, lifting fine grains of sand that settle again just as softly. People notice, but they do not react strongly. It is simply part of the day. Something expected. Something familiar. In one of the homes, the older man now steps outside. He pauses at the doorway, allowing his eyes to adjust to the brighter light. The warmth touches his face, but it is no longer overwhelming. He takes a few slow steps into the courtyard. Each movement is measured. Each step placed with quiet awareness. He looks around, not searching, but observing. The same village. The same patterns. The same gentle continuation of life. And yet, Like the man who stood earlier at the edge of the shade, there is a quiet sense that each moment, though repeated, is also new in its own small way. Nothing changes quickly. But nothing is completely still either. The day moves. Time moves. And the village moves with it. A woman begins to prepare for the evening meal. It is still early, but preparation here often begins long before the moment arrives. Ingredients are gathered, surfaces are cleaned, small tasks are completed one by one. There is no rush to finish. Only a steady movement toward what will come. The smell of food begins to return, faint at first. It drifts through the air, carried gently by the breeze, mixing with the dry scent of the desert, creating a quiet sense of comfort. As the sun lowers further, the light changes again. Shadows grow longer, stretching across the ground, touching the edges of walls, softening the shapes of everything they reach. The village begins to feel different. Not busier. Not louder. But fuller in a subtle way. The quiet of midday has passed. The stillness has lifted just enough. Now there is movement again. Purpose again. A gentle return to the rhythm that carries the day forward. The children begin to drift back toward their homes. The men complete their tasks and set their tools aside. The women continue their preparations, their hands moving with quiet focus. Everything draws slowly toward the same point. Evening. But it is not here yet. For now, the afternoon continues its calm and steady flow, holding the village in a soft balance between rest and activity. A balance that feels natural. A balance that feels complete. And as the light continues to fade, just a little more with each passing moment, the village remains exactly as it has always been. Quiet. Steady. And gently alive within the wide, endless desert. Next part 5. The afternoon begins to lean gently toward evening. The change is slow, almost unnoticeable at first. The light softens further, losing its brightness and taking on a warmer tone. The edges of the buildings glow with a quiet golden color, and the long shadows stretch even farther across the ground. The village moves within this light as if it has known it forever. There is no signal that the day is changing. No moment where one thing ends and another begins. Instead, everything shifts together, gradually, like the slow turning of the sky itself. The air cools just slightly. It is not yet cool, but it no longer carries the same weight of heat. Breathing feels easier. Movement feels lighter. The body begins to release the stillness it held during the hottest hours. This is a gentle return. In the courtyards, activity becomes a little more steady again. The woman who had begun preparing the evening meal continues her work. A small fire is built with care, the wood arranged in a way that allows it to burn slowly and evenly. The flame grows quietly, flickering with soft movement, casting a warm glow against the surrounding walls. A pot is placed above it. Inside, simple ingredients begin to warm. The sound is soft, just a faint simmer, a quiet shifting of liquid and heat. It blends easily into the calm of the village, becoming part of the background, part of the rhythm. Nearby, another woman kneads dough. Her hands press and fold in slow, steady motions. The texture changes gradually beneath her fingers, becoming smooth and ready. She works without looking too closely, guided by memory, by touch, by repetition learned over many years. The smell of cooking grows slightly stronger now. It moves through the air, reaching beyond the courtyard, touching the narrow paths, drifting toward nearby homes. It is not sharp or overwhelming. It is soft, comforting, familiar. It signals something without needing to say it. The evening is approaching. At the edge of the village, the man in the field finishes his work. He stands slowly, brushing the soil from his hands. His movements carry a quiet sense of completion, though there is no final task, no clear ending. The work will return tomorrow, just as it always does. He looks across the small rows of plants. They remain still, holding their place in the earth, waiting for the night's cooler air. There is nothing more to do for now. He turns and begins the walk back. His steps follow the same path as before, but the light has changed. The ground looks different now, shaped by longer shadows, softened by the warm tone of the lowering sun. Each step feels familiar. And yet, in this light, everything appears slightly new. Back in the village, the older man walks slowly along a narrow path. He does not carry anything. He is not moving toward a task. He simply walks. His pace is unhurried, his posture relaxed. From time to time, he pauses, standing quietly as if listening not to any particular sound, but to the space itself. The village around him continues its steady motion. People pass, each focused on their own small tasks, yet aware of one another in a quiet way. A nod, a glance, a brief word spoken softly. These moments are small, but they hold meaning. They form a quiet thread that connects everyone. Children begin to gather again in the open spaces. Their energy returns with the softer light. They move a little more freely now, tracing paths that cross and overlap. Their footsteps leave marks in the sand that stretch long in the angled sunlight. They speak to one another in low voices. Even their play carries a kind of calm. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels loud. The breeze that had returned earlier now moves a little more steadily. It slips through the village, carrying the warmth of the day away little by little. It lifts the edges of cloth, stirs the surface of the sand, and passes along without resistance. The sky begins to change color. The pale blue deepens slightly, and near the horizon, a soft glow begins to form. It is faint at first, a gentle shift that spreads slowly, touching the edges of the desert. The sun lowers. Its light becomes richer, warmer, casting everything in tones of gold and soft amber. The walls of the homes reflect this light, glowing quietly, as if holding the warmth of the entire day within them. In one courtyard, the evening meal nears completion. The pot over the fire releases a soft, steady aroma. The bread prepared earlier is uncovered, its surface still soft. Small portions are arranged, not with precision, but with care. People begin to gather. Not in a formal way. Not all at once. They arrive slowly, one by one, drawn by the shared rhythm of the day. They sit close together, often on the ground, forming small, quiet groups. The space between them is minimal, but comfortable. Food is shared without ceremony. A piece passed from hand to hand. A small portion offered, then accepted. There are no large gestures. Only quiet giving. Only quiet receiving. Voices rise slightly, but remain soft. The conversations are simple. They speak of the day, of what was done, of what might be done tomorrow. Nothing is spoken with urgency. Nothing needs to be decided quickly. Time moves differently here. There is always enough of it. The older man joins one of the groups. He sits slowly, adjusting himself with care. A piece of bread is placed in his hand. He nods slightly, a quiet acknowledgement, and begins to eat. The child sits nearby. He watches, listens, and eats in the same slow way. The rhythm of the group shapes him, just as it has shaped everyone here. Above them, the sky continues its slow transformation. The warm colors deepen. The light softens further. The sun approaches the horizon, though it has not yet touched it. The entire village feels held in this moment. A moment between day and night. A moment that does not rush. A moment that stretches gently, allowing everything to settle, to gather, to breathe. The heat of the day fades. The stillness of the desert begins to return, not as an absence, but as a quiet presence. The same presence that was there in the early morning. The same presence that will remain through the night. And as the evening draws closer, and the light becomes softer with each passing breath, the village continues its calm and steady life. Unchanged. Unhurried. And deeply at peace within the fading glow of the desert sky. The sun lowers until it gently meets the edge of the earth. There is no sudden change when it happens. The moment passes quietly, almost unnoticed, as the bright circle of light softens and begins to slip away beyond the distant line of sand. The glow it leaves behind spreads slowly across the sky, deepening into warm shades of amber, then rose, then a soft, fading gold. The village rests within this light. Everything appears calmer now, touched by the gentle colors of evening. The walls of the homes no longer reflect heat, but instead hold a quiet warmth, like something slowly letting go of the day. The air cools further. It moves more freely now, brushing across the ground, slipping through narrow paths, carrying with it a sense of relief that is felt more than noticed. People remain seated where they have gathered. The evening meal continues without rush. Each bite is taken slowly. Each movement is simple and unforced. The act of eating is not separate from the act of resting. It is part of the same quiet rhythm. A few voices rise and fall. Soft conversations drift through the open spaces, blending together without forming anything sharp or distinct. Words are exchanged, but they do not linger. They pass gently, like the breeze, leaving behind a feeling rather than a memory of exact meaning. The child sits close, his movements slower now. The day has stretched long, and his energy begins to settle. He leans slightly against the wall beside him, holding his piece of bread loosely, taking small bites as his attention drifts between the people around him and the changing sky above. He looks upward. The colors there are fading. The bright tones of sunset soften into deeper shades. The blue grows richer, slowly darkening, while the last traces of gold disappear into the horizon. Night approaches in a quiet, steady way. There is no line where day ends and night begins. Only a gradual blending. As the light continues to fade, small preparations begin. The fire in the courtyard is adjusted. A piece of wood is shifted. Another is added. The flame responds softly, growing just enough to provide a gentle glow as the darkness increases. Inside the homes, lamps are prepared. Simple, small sources of light, often a shallow dish with oil and a wick, are placed carefully in familiar spots. When lit, they do not brighten the entire room. They create small circles of warmth, leaving the rest of the space in soft shadow. Light here is not meant to remove the darkness. It is meant to live within it. One by one, the lamps are lit. A quiet flame appears, steady and calm. It flickers slightly with the movement of air, casting gentle patterns along the walls. These patterns shift slowly, never the same, always changing in small, quiet ways. Outside, the village paths begin to dim. The details of the ground become softer, less defined. The edges of buildings blur slightly, blending into the deepening blue of the evening. The breeze continues, cooler now. It carries away the last traces of the day's heat, leaving behind a more comfortable stillness. The man who had returned from the field now sits near the doorway of his home. He does not speak. He simply rests, his hands loosely placed, his gaze directed outward. There is nothing he needs to do. Nothing left to finish. The day has already given what it had to give. Across the village, similar moments unfold. People sit. They lean against walls. They speak quietly or not at all. Some look at the sky. Others watch the soft movements of light and shadow around them. There is no single center to this evening. No one place where everything gathers. Instead, the calm spreads evenly, touching every part of the village in the same gentle way. The child's eyes grow heavier. He shifts slightly, placing his head against the wall. His breathing slows, becoming softer, more even. The sounds around him fade into a distant hum. Sleep begins to arrive. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But in small, quiet steps. He closes his eyes. Nearby, the woman who prepared the meal watches him for a moment. Her expression remains calm, her movements slow. She adjusts the cloth beside him, creating a more comfortable place for him to rest. Then she returns to stillness. The sky above continues its transition. The last light of the sun has now disappeared. In its place, a deeper blue spreads across the entire expanse. One by one, small points of light begin to appear. Stars. At first, only a few. Then more. They emerge quietly, without drawing attention, filling the sky in a slow and steady pattern. The darkness does not feel empty. It feels full, wide, endless. The village sits beneath it, small and steady. The same village that greeted the morning now settles into the night. The same walls, the same paths, the same quiet rhythm now softened even further by the absence of daylight. A distant sound can be heard. Perhaps the movement of an animal. Perhaps the shifting of sand under a light breeze. It is faint, barely noticeable, and it fades as quickly as it came. Silence returns. Not complete silence, but a deep quiet. The kind of quiet that allows every small sound to exist without disturbance. Inside the homes, the lamps continue to glow. Their light is soft, contained. People begin to move indoors. Not in a rush, not all at once, but gradually. A few rise, stepping carefully along the dim paths. Others remain outside a little longer, enjoying the cool air, the open sky, the slow arrival of night. The older man stands again. He takes a few measured steps toward his home, his figure outlined briefly by the soft glow of a nearby lamp. He pauses at the doorway, looking back once more at the village. Everything is calm. Everything is as it should be. He steps inside. The doorway darkens behind him. Outside, the village continues to settle. The breeze slows. The sounds fade. The stars grow brighter. And the desert, wide and endless, holds the quiet village gently within its night. Next part 7. The night deepens slowly. There is no single moment when darkness fully arrives. It gathers in layers, soft and steady, until the last traces of evening fade into a calm and endless sky. The stars above now shine more clearly, scattered across the darkness like quiet points of light that have always been there, waiting to be seen. The village rests beneath them. From a distance, it almost disappears into the land. The shapes of the homes blend into the surrounding earth, their outlines softened by shadow. Only a few small lights remain, gentle glows from oil lamps inside the homes, flickering faintly through doorways and narrow openings. These lights do not reach far. They stay close, creating small spaces of warmth within the larger stillness. Inside one home, the older man has settled into his place. The lamp beside him burns quietly, its flame steady and low. The light touches only part of the room, leaving the corners in shadow. The walls, thick and cool, hold the night air gently. He lies down slowly. There is no sudden movement, no urgency. His body lowers with care, finding a familiar position. His hands come to rest beside him. His breathing is already calm, already steady. Sleep comes easily here. It does not need to be forced. Outside, the pathways are nearly still. A few figures move quietly between homes, their steps soft against the ground. They speak in low voices, if they speak at all. Most words are unnecessary now. The day has passed. The night asks for quiet. In one courtyard, a small group remains seated. They have not yet gone inside. The air is cooler here, more open, and the sky above feels wide and close at the same time. They sit without speaking much, each one present, each one at ease. A faint breeze passes through. It carries the coolness of the desert night, brushing gently against skin, lifting the edges of cloth, moving on without resistance. It does not disturb the silence. It becomes part of it. The child, who had fallen asleep earlier, is now inside. He lies on a simple woven mat, covered lightly. His breathing is soft and even, rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The events of the day have already begun to fade from his mind, replaced by the quiet depth of rest. Nearby, the woman who watched over him prepares to sleep as well. She adjusts the small lamp, lowering its flame. The room grows dimmer. The shadows deepen. But there is no fear in the darkness here. Only familiarity. Only calm. She lies down, her movements slow and careful, and soon her breathing matches the quiet rhythm of the night. Across the village, similar scenes unfold. One by one, the lights dim. One by one, the small movements of the day come to rest. Doors close gently, not with sound, but with a soft finality. The paths remain empty. The courtyards grow still. The village does not sleep all at once. It settles gradually. Each person finding rest in their own time, in their own quiet way. Above, the sky continues to open. More stars become visible as the night deepens. They do not move quickly. They hold their positions with quiet patience, marking time in a way that feels distant and unhurried. The desert beyond the village stretches outward in every direction. It holds the same stillness, the same calm. The sand, which shifted gently under the heat of the day, now rests undisturbed. The wind moves only lightly, barely enough to change the surface. Somewhere far away, a faint sound may rise, a distant animal, a shifting of earth, but it does not reach the village with any strength. It remains part of the wider night, separate, quiet, and far. Within the village, the silence deepens. It becomes fuller, more complete. Not empty, but filled with the quiet presence of everything that has settled into rest. The man who had sat near his doorway earlier now sleeps. His posture has softened, his breathing even. The concerns of the day, small as they were, have faded. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to carry. Only rest. In another home, a small lamp still burns. Its flame flickers gently, casting soft patterns that move slowly along the wall. The light shifts with each faint movement of air, creating a quiet rhythm of shadow and glow. But even this light will not last. Soon, it too will be lowered. Soon, the room will join the rest of the village in darkness. Time continues to pass, though it feels almost still. The night holds everything in a gentle balance. The warmth of the day has fully faded now, replaced by a cool, steady calm. The air feels lighter, easier, as if it has been given space to rest. The earth releases its heat slowly, quietly, returning to a state of balance. Hours pass without notice. There are no clocks here. No measured time. Only the slow movement of the stars, the steady rhythm of breathing, the deep and quiet rest that fills the village. In this stillness, everything feels connected. The homes, the people, the land, the sky above, they exist together in a shared calm, each one part of the same quiet whole. Nothing is separate. Nothing is out of place. The village remains as it has always been. Held gently within the wide desert. Carried forward by the same slow rhythm. Day into night. Night into day. Without interruption. Without change. And as the night continues, deep and steady, the village rests completely. Silent. Peaceful. And softly drifting through the quiet hours beneath the endless sky. Next part 8. The night continues, deep and unbroken. Time moves quietly here, without measure, without urgency. The hours pass like a soft breath, one blending into the next so gently that they almost feel like a single, continuous moment. The village remains still. Every home is at rest now. The small lamps that once flickered in the darkness have been lowered or extinguished, leaving only the faint glow of the sky above to shape the outlines of the buildings. The darkness is not heavy. It is calm. It settles over the village like a soft covering, holding everything in place. Above, the stars fill the sky. There are more of them now than earlier in the evening, their light steady and clear. They stretch across the vast expanse, forming quiet patterns that have remained unchanged for generations. No one in the village watches them at this hour, and yet they remain, constant and patient. The air is cooler still. It carries a gentle chill that was absent during the day. It moves lightly through the narrow paths, across the open courtyards, and along the surfaces of the mud brick walls. Inside the homes, the coolness is softened. The walls hold a quiet balance, protecting against both the heat of day and the deeper chill of night. The spaces feel enclosed but not confined, calm but not empty. The child sleeps deeply now. His breathing is slow and steady, each breath blending into the next without effort. His small movements have stopped. His body rests completely, held in the simple comfort of the familiar space. Nearby, the woman remains asleep as well. Her posture is still, her face relaxed. The quiet of the room surrounds her, uninterrupted, allowing rest to settle fully. Across the village, similar stillness exists. Every person rests in their own place. Every home holds the same calm. There are no voices now. No footsteps. No movement that can be easily heard. Only the faintest sounds remain so soft that they almost disappear into the silence. A slight shift of fabric. A quiet breath. The distant whisper of air moving across sand. Beyond the village, the desert stretches endlessly. It holds the same stillness, the same quiet presence. The dunes, shaped by wind over long periods of time, now lie undisturbed. Their surfaces appear smooth in the dim light, untouched, waiting for the next movement of air. Somewhere far away, the night continues in its own quiet way. But here, in this small village, everything is held gently in rest. Time passes. Slowly. Steadily. Without interruption. The stars begin their gradual movement across the sky. It is not something easily seen. It does not draw attention. But over time, their positions shift, marking the silent passage of the night. The air cools a little more. The ground releases the last of its stored warmth. The balance between day and night settles fully into the stillness. Hours continue to pass. There is no change in the rhythm. No sudden movement. No interruption to the quiet. And yet, within this stillness, something very subtle begins to form. A small change. So slight that it could be missed. Far along the horizon, there is the faintest hint of light. It is not bright. It does not break the darkness. It simply exists, a soft and distant presence. The beginning of morning. But it is still far away. The night remains. The stars still shine clearly. The village continues to rest. Inside the homes, sleep holds steady. The child shifts slightly, then becomes still again. His breathing does not change. The movement is small, natural, part of the deeper rhythm of rest. In another home, a man turns slowly in his sleep, adjusting his position without waking. The quiet remains unbroken. The breeze passes again. It is light, almost unnoticeable, but it moves through the village with a quiet persistence. It touches each surface, each wall, each open space, then moves on. The faint light at the horizon grows only slightly. It does not hurry. It does not push the night away. It simply waits. The balance between darkness and light begins to shift, but slowly, always slowly. The village does not respond yet. No one wakes. No one moves. The rhythm of sleep continues, deep and uninterrupted. The stars remain visible, though their brightness begins to soften just a little, touched by the first hints of the coming day. Time moves forward in the same steady way. There is no need to measure it. No need to mark it. The night carries everything gently toward the morning. And the village, quiet and unchanged, remains resting within it. Waiting. Without knowing. For the slow and certain return of light. Next part 9. The night begins its final stretch without announcing it. It does not end. It simply becomes thinner, softer, as if the darkness itself is slowly loosening its hold on the world. The stars still shine above the village, but their light feels slightly less sharp now, less distant, as though the sky is beginning to breathe in a different way. The faint glow on the horizon grows a little clearer. Still far away. Still gentle. But no longer uncertain. Inside the village, nothing has changed yet. The homes remain still. The people continue to sleep in their quiet, familiar ways. The child lies curled on his mat, breathing evenly, completely unaware of the slow turning of the sky above him. The woman nearby rests without movement, her presence steady and calm. The village holds its silence. But the night is no longer at its deepest point. Somewhere in that long stretch of time, between rest and awakening, the world begins to shift again. Outside, the desert is unchanged in shape, but not in feeling. The sand remains still, yet the air carries a subtle difference now. It is no longer the coldest part of the night. There is a softness returning, almost unnoticeable, but present enough to be felt in the quiet spaces between breaths. The wind moves lightly across the ground. It does not disturb anything. It simply passes through, as it always does, carrying the memory of night forward. The stars remain overhead. They continue their slow movement across the sky, marking time without sound. Their presence is steady, but the darkness around them is beginning to loosen, allowing faint traces of depth and variation to appear in the sky's color. A transition is forming. Not yet visible to most eyes, but present. In one of the homes, a man shifts slightly in his sleep. It is a small movement, natural and unremarkable. His breathing changes for a moment, then returns to its steady rhythm. The body responds to something subtle, the shift in temperature, the quiet change in the air. But he does not wake. The village remains asleep. Still. Quiet. Held within the last portion of the night. The faint glow at the horizon continues to expand slowly. It spreads not upward suddenly, but outward, gently, like a soft light being poured into the edge of the world. The darkness does not resist it. It simply yields in small increments, allowing space for what is coming. The desert reflects this change in the most subtle way. The sand, still dark, begins to lose some of its depth. The contrast between ground and sky softens. Shapes that were once barely visible become slightly more defined. The village begins to reappear, little by little, within the darkness. Edges of walls become faintly clearer. The outline of doorways gains a soft definition. Still no movement from within. Only the suggestion of form returning. The air continues its gradual shift. The coldest point of the night has passed. What remains is a coolness that feels lighter, less sharp. It carries a quiet comfort, the kind that often comes just before waking, though no one has yet woken. The sky slowly changes. A deep blue begins to form near the horizon, blending into the remaining darkness above. The stars still shine, but they are now set against a slightly different background, one that hints at change without fully revealing it. Time continues its slow passage. The village remains still. But the world around it is preparing. In the distance, beyond the village and beyond sight, the desert stretches on. It too is part of this transition. It does not move, but it responds to the same gradual shift. The night releases it gently, allowing the coming day to approach without resistance. Inside the homes, sleep continues. Deep and uninterrupted. But something small begins to change in the rhythm of rest. A slight shift in breathing. A subtle adjustment in posture. These are not signs of waking. Only signs of time moving forward. The child stirs faintly, then settles again. His face remains calm. His sleep is not disturbed. It simply passes through a lighter stage, as if preparing for what comes next. The horizon grows brighter. Still soft. Still distant. But unmistakably present now. The night is not gone. But it is no longer complete. It shares the sky with the earliest hint of morning, and the two exist together for a brief, quiet moment. The village remains in between. Neither night nor day fully holding it. Just stillness. Just rest. And the slow, patient turning of time. Above, the stars begin to lose a small part of their brightness, not fading, but stepping back as the light gently increases. They remain visible, but they no longer dominate the sky in the same way. The balance shifts. Ever so slightly. And still, no one wakes. The village continues to sleep through the transition, held in the soft boundary between darkness and light. Everything is calm. Everything is steady. Everything is waiting, without knowing it is waiting. And as the horizon grows a little brighter, and the sky begins to open toward a new day, the desert village remains wrapped in its quiet sleep. Suspended gently between night and morning. Next part 10. The first true hint of morning arrives without sound. It is not a moment that can be clearly marked. There is no break in the sky, no sudden shift in the air. Instead, it is a slow unfolding light spreading so gently across the horizon that the night itself seems to breathe differently as it happens. The deep blue of the sky begins to soften. Not disappear. Not yet. But loosen, as if the darkness is no longer holding tightly to the world. The stars remain, but their presence feels quieter now, less dominant, as though they are stepping back without leaving. Inside the village, everything is still asleep. The homes remain quiet, their interiors wrapped in soft darkness. The oil lamps have long been extinguished. Only the faintest traces of shadow and shape remain within the rooms, shaped by the growing light outside. The child sleeps on, unchanged. His breathing steady. His body relaxed. The woman nearby remains still as well, her rest uninterrupted, her presence calm and grounded in the familiar silence of the night's end. The village has not yet awakened. But the morning is approaching. Outside, the desert begins to show subtle detail again. The sand, once nearly invisible in darkness, now holds faint texture. Small ridges and soft curves begin to reappear as the sky brightens. The world slowly regains its form, piece by piece. The air is cooler than the day will be, but no longer as cold as before. It carries a balanced feeling, neither night nor morning fully, but something between the two. A transition held in place. The faint light at the horizon expands further. It spreads upward now, gently touching more of the sky. The darkness above it begins to lift, not retreating all at once, but fading in layers, like a slow exhale. The village remains unchanged in its silence. But its edges are becoming clearer. Walls that were once lost in shadow now appear with soft definition. Doorways take shape again. Narrow paths between homes begin to separate themselves from the surrounding ground. The village is returning to view. Not waking yet, but becoming visible again. In one home, a small shift occurs. The child stirs slightly, turning his head a little as the changing light filters faintly into the room. His eyes remain closed. He does not wake. But the body senses the world shifting around it, even in sleep. This is the quiet language of morning. Not abrupt. Not demanding. Just present. Across the village, the same slow transformation continues. The sky grows lighter. The stars fade gradually, not disappearing all at once, but becoming softer, less distinct. Their presence lingers, but only just. The horizon now holds a clearer glow. Pale at first, then gradually warmer in tone. Hints of color begin to form, soft gold blending into faint orange, still distant, still gentle. The night is nearly complete. But not gone yet. Inside the homes, the stillness remains. Breathing, sleeping, resting, all unchanged. Yet the environment around them has shifted enough that the coming return of movement feels inevitable, even if it has not yet begun. The desert outside the village now reveals more detail with each passing moment. The sand reflects the growing light in subtle ways, no longer flat or dark, but textured and alive with soft gradients of color. Small shadows reappear where uneven ground rises and falls. Everything becomes visible again. Slowly. Naturally. The wind is almost absent now. Only a faint presence remains, moving occasionally, lightly, without direction. It does not disturb the silence. It supports it. The sky continues to brighten. The deep night blue transitions into a softer shade, closer to early morning tones. The horizon grows more luminous, spreading upward like a gentle wave of light. Still, the village does not wake. It remains suspended in that final quiet moment between sleep and awareness. The child's breathing changes slightly again. A little deeper inhale. A subtle shift in posture. But still no waking. Only preparation. Only transition. Outside, the desert holds its breath in a way that feels almost complete. The stars are now faint. Some have disappeared entirely. Others remain, but only as soft impressions against the growing light. The sky is no longer fully night. But not yet fully day. It is the in-between space, the quiet passage where everything changes without resistance. And within that space, the village remains peaceful. Unmoved. Undisturbed. Holding on to the last softness of sleep as the world around it prepares for morning. The horizon brightens a little more. And with it, the promise of a new day begins to settle gently over the desert. While the village, still asleep, waits quietly for the moment it will slowly return to life. Next, part 11. The first signs of morning begin to settle more firmly into the desert. The horizon, once only faintly glowing, now carries a clearer band of light. It is still soft, still gentle, but it no longer feels distant. It feels present, as if the day is standing just beyond the edge of the sky, waiting without urgency. The night is still here. But it is giving way. Slowly. Without struggle. The stars continue to fade one by one. Some remain visible, faint, and quiet, while others have already disappeared into the growing brightness. The sky is no longer a single dark field. It is layered now, deep blue above, soft light below, and a quiet blending in between. Inside the village, sleep still holds. The homes remain calm, wrapped in the last moments of night stillness. There is a quiet heaviness in the air, not from darkness anymore, but from rest itself, the kind of rest that has not yet fully ended. The child lies as he has been, but his sleep is lighter now. His body responds subtly to the changing world outside. A small shift in his shoulders. A faint movement of his hand. His breathing remains steady, but the depth of sleep is slowly changing. The woman nearby also stirs slightly. Not waking. Only adjusting. A natural response to the shift in time, as if the body senses that something is approaching. The village is still quiet. But it is no longer deeply asleep in the same way. Outside, the desert has begun to transform more clearly. The sand now reflects early light in soft gradients. Shadows are no longer deep or heavy, but thin and stretched. The shapes of the land are visible again, gently outlined by the growing glow of morning. The air feels different. Not cold. Not warm. Just balanced. A calm middle space between night and day. The faint breeze returns, moving lightly across the open ground. It does not disturb anything. It simply passes through, carrying the change of the sky with it. The horizon continues to brighten. Now, hints of gold and pale orange appear more clearly. The light spreads upward, touching more of the sky with each passing moment. The darkness no longer holds the same strength. It lingers only in the upper reaches, slowly retreating. Inside the homes, stillness begins to soften. Not yet movement, but readiness. The older man in one of the rooms opens his eyes slightly. He does not rise. He does not speak. He simply lies there for a moment, aware of the change in light filtering into the space. The room is no longer fully dark. Soft shapes are now visible along the walls, faint and peaceful. He remains still. Listening. Feeling the shift of the morning without yet joining it. Across the village, similar moments begin to appear. A slight turn of the head. A deeper breath. A quiet adjustment in posture. These are not signs of waking fully. They are signs of return. The body slowly moving back toward awareness, guided by the steady arrival of light. Outside, the sky grows brighter again. The transition is now more visible. The deep blue of night has lifted further, replaced by a soft, expanding brightness that fills the horizon and begins to rise into the upper sky. The stars are now few, their presence faint and fading. The desert responds in subtle ways. The sand reflects more light, revealing gentle textures that were hidden during the night. The edges of the village feel clearer, more defined, as if the world is slowly coming back into focus. Still, there is no rush. Everything remains calm. Everything remains slow. In one home, the child finally opens his eyes. Not fully awake at first. Just a quiet opening, as if testing the light that now fills the room. He lies still for a moment, adjusting to the soft brightness. His breathing changes slightly, deeper now, more aware. He does not move immediately. He simply looks. The morning has arrived inside the room. And soon, it will arrive in him fully. The woman nearby also opens her eyes shortly after. She remains still for a moment, then slowly begins to sit up. Her movements are unhurried, natural, shaped by years of the same rhythm. There is no urgency in the morning here. Only continuation. Outside, the sky is now clearly transitioning into day. The last traces of night are fading from the upper sky, while the horizon glows with steady, growing light. The colors are soft but expanding, filling more of the world with warmth. The village is no longer fully asleep. But it has not yet fully awakened either. It exists now in a quiet in-between state where sleep is ending, and life is gently returning. A door opens somewhere in the village. Then another. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But gradually, like the unfolding of something familiar. Figures begin to appear in the soft light, stepping into courtyards, pausing at doorways, adjusting to the morning air. The day is beginning again. Slowly. Naturally. As it always has. And as the desert village rises gently from its rest, the quiet rhythm of another day begins to form once more. Next part 12. Morning now settles fully over the desert. The light is no longer distant or uncertain. It has arrived gently, spreading across the land in a soft, even glow. The sky has shifted into a pale blue, clean and open, holding the quiet clarity that only early morning brings. The night is gone. But it has not vanished abruptly. It has simply dissolved into the day, leaving behind a calm stillness that lingers for a while longer, like a memory held in the air. In the village, movement begins again. Not quickly. Not loudly. But steadily. A door opens, and a figure steps out, pausing for a moment in the morning light. Another follows. Then another. Each movement is unhurried, as if the village itself is remembering how to move after a long rest. The air is cool now. Comfortably cool. It carries the freshness of early morning, when the desert has not yet begun to warm under the sun. There is a softness to it, a lightness that makes every breath feel clearer. Inside the homes, the final traces of sleep fade. The child sits up slowly on his mat. He blinks a few times, adjusting to the brightness that now fills the room. His movements are gentle, still carrying the softness of sleep. He does not rush to stand. He simply sits for a moment, looking around as if rejoining the world step by step. Nearby, the woman is already moving. She gathers a small cloth, folds it carefully, and places it aside. Her actions are familiar, practiced, almost silent. The morning does not require explanation. It only requires return. Outside, the village begins to form its rhythm again. Smoke rises from small fires being lit once more. Not large fires, not urgent ones, just enough for warmth, for cooking, for the quiet beginning of the day's work. The smell of bread returns. Faint at first, then growing slightly stronger as more homes begin preparing food. It mixes with the cool air, creating a sense of comfort that belongs only to this time of day. The older man steps outside again. He pauses at the threshold of his home, letting the morning light touch his face. His eyes adjust slowly. There is no hurry in his movements. Only awareness. He looks across the village. It is already changing from the quiet stillness of night into the gentle activity of morning. People move between homes. Some carry water. Some tend to small tasks. Some simply stand for a moment, looking outward, as if greeting the day without words. The cultivated field at the edge of the village is now brighter, more visible. The man who tends it walks there once again. His steps follow the familiar path, now lit clearly by morning light. The soil appears richer in color, holding the faint moisture of careful tending. He kneels again. Not because it is urgent, but because it is part of the rhythm. His hands move through the earth with the same steady care as before. He checks the plants, adjusts the soil, ensures that everything is as it should be. The work continues, as it always does, tied closely to the cycle of the day. Nearby, water is guided gently through its narrow channel. It flows slowly, reflecting the morning light in small, shifting patterns. The man watches it briefly, then continues his work. Everything here is connected. The land. The water. The people. The day. Back in the village, children begin to move more freely. The boy who woke earlier now steps outside. He squints slightly at the brightness, then adjusts, letting his eyes settle into the morning. He walks slowly at first, then with more confidence as he becomes fully awake. The village feels different in daylight. Clearer. Lighter. More open. Shadows are short now, soft and close to the ground. The walls of the homes glow gently in the morning sun, their surfaces showing the texture of earth and time. Voices begin to rise. Still soft. Still calm. But more present than before. People greet each other as they move through shared spaces. A nod. A quiet word. A brief exchange that carries no urgency, only recognition. The morning meal is prepared again in small ways. What remains from earlier is shared. New food is prepared where needed. Everything moves in a steady flow, without interruption. The village does not begin its day with a start. It simply continues. The breeze passes through again. It is light, almost playful now, moving gently between buildings, lifting small bits of dust, carrying the scent of earth and fire and bread. The sky is fully bright now. A clear, open blue stretches above the village, uninterrupted and calm. The sun is higher, but not yet intense. It offers warmth without pressure. The desert beyond the village lies wide and still. It holds the morning light with quiet acceptance, stretching endlessly in every direction. And within it, the village lives its morning life. Steady. Simple. Unhurried. A continuation of everything that came before it. And as the day settles into its early hours, the desert village moves gently forward once again, as it always has, and as it always will. Next part 13. The morning continues its slow rise. Close. 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 The late morning settles into place with a quiet certainty. The sun is now high enough to feel more present, more direct, though still not overwhelming. Its light spreads across the village in steady brightness, bringing clarity to every surface. The earth, the walls, the paths all appear fully awake under it, as if the world has opened its eyes completely. Yet even in this brightness, the village does not hurry. It continues in its slow, familiar rhythm. The air begins to warm more noticeably now. Not sharply, but gradually, like a hand gently resting over the land. The coolness of early morning has faded, replaced by a steady warmth that encourages slower movement and quieter pacing. Inside the homes, people adjust naturally. Shaded areas become more important again. Doorways are left open just enough for air to pass through, but not enough to let in too much heat. Cloths are repositioned. Small changes are made without thought, guided by long familiarity with the cycle of the day. The child, now more comfortable in his surroundings, sits with others in a shaded corner. Their presence is quiet and unstructured. They do not organize their time. They simply exist within it, shifting occasionally, speaking softly, then falling back into silence. A stick traces patterns in the sand. The marks are temporary, delicate, already beginning to blur at the edges as the air moves across them. No one tries to preserve them. They are meant only for the moment. The older man remains under shade, his posture unchanged. He watches the village with a calm, steady gaze. There is no urgency in his attention, no expectation. Only observation. The flow of life around him continues without needing to be acknowledged, yet he is part of it in the same way as everything else. At the edge of the cultivated field, the man working there notices the shift in light. The sun is stronger now, and the soil reflects that change. He pauses again, letting his hand rest briefly on the ground. It is warmer than before, but still within balance. The plants remain steady. Their leaves show no sudden change, only the quiet response of life continuing under increasing light. The water channel still moves gently, though its flow is now watched more carefully as the day grows warmer. He adjusts it slightly. A small correction. A careful guiding of direction. Nothing more. Everything remains in control through attention and patience. Back in the village, the sounds of morning activity have softened. The earlier energy has transitioned into something more measured. Work continues, but at a slower pace. Conversations are fewer now, and when they happen, they remain brief and low. The village does not grow loud. Even in its busiest moments, it holds onto its calm. The sky above is clear and unwavering. A wide field of blue stretches endlessly overhead, unbroken and bright. The sun sits higher now, marking the progression toward midday. Shadows are at their shortest. They gather closely around objects and people, almost directly beneath them, as if the world is drawing itself inward under the strength of the light. The breeze appears again, but only briefly. It moves across the village in a thin, warm stream, offering little relief but still carrying motion. It touches surfaces gently, then disappears into the larger stillness of the air. Inside one home, the woman pauses her work again. She stands still for a moment, looking toward the doorway. The brightness outside contrasts with the shaded calm inside. She does not step out yet. She simply observes the balance between light and shelter. Everything in the village now revolves around this balance. Light and shade. Movement and rest. Work and pause. The child shifts slightly where he sits. His attention drifts toward the changing position of shadows on the ground. They are smaller now, more compressed, moving slowly as the sun continues its path. He does not speak. He simply watches. The older man finally stands after a long pause. He walks again, slowly, through the familiar paths. The village feels different in this stronger light, but still unchanged in essence. It is the same place, only seen in another phase of the day. He passes a group preparing tools. A quiet exchange happens as he moves by. No interruption. Only acknowledgement. At the field, the man working there begins to prepare for the next stage of the day. The soil, now warmer, requires attention in different ways. The water must be managed carefully as the heat increases. He moves with steady precision, ensuring everything remains in balance. There is no panic in this work. Only awareness. Only care. The village continues its steady progression toward midday. The air grows warmer. The light grows stronger. Movement becomes more deliberate, more measured, less frequent but still constant. And yet, nothing feels disrupted. Nothing feels out of place. Everything remains within the same quiet rhythm that has carried the village from morning onward. A rhythm that does not break. Only shifts. Only flows. And as the desert village moves closer to the center of the day, it remains calm beneath the bright and steady sky. Living gently within the warmth of late morning. Next part 17. The late morning now leans gently into the beginning of midday. The sun stands higher, and its presence becomes more certain across the desert. The light is steady and strong, no longer soft like early morning, yet still not at its harshest. It holds a kind of quiet firmness, as if the sky itself has settled into a stable position above the village. The air warms gradually. Not in a sudden shift, but in a slow, continuous rise that can be felt more than seen. The ground begins to hold heat now, and the sand reflects the light with a brighter, more direct glow. Still, the village does not change its pace. It adjusts. As it always has. Inside the homes, shaded spaces become more important again. People move deeper into the protection of walls and coverings. Open areas are used less. Doorways remain partially open, just enough for air to pass through, but most activity shifts inward or beneath shade. The rhythm of the village becomes slightly quieter. Not less active. Just more contained. The child now sits closer to the interior shade of a home. His earlier wandering has slowed. He rests with others nearby, his attention less scattered now, more settled. He listens to the faint sounds around him, the movement of fabric, the distant clink of tools being set aside or picked up, the soft shifting of people adjusting their space. Everything feels slower in this heat. Not difficult. Just careful. The older man returns to a shaded resting place once more. He sits without speaking, his posture relaxed. His gaze remains outward, but his attention is soft. There is nothing he needs to follow, nothing urgent to observe. The village continues around him in its steady way. At the cultivated field, the man working there now moves with increased caution. The soil has grown warmer under the stronger sun. The plants remain steady, but the conditions require closer attention. He checks the water flow again, ensuring it continues evenly through the narrow channels. A slight adjustment is made. Just enough to keep balance. Nothing more. Everything in the field depends on this quiet care. And the care is constant. Back in the village, the soundscape has softened further. Morning activity has eased into a quieter phase. Tasks that require movement are now slower, more deliberate. Some people pause entirely, resting in shaded areas. Others continue with simple work that can be done without exertion. There is no rush in any direction. The village does not resist the heat. It moves with it. The sky above is bright and clear. The blue is strong now, filled with full daylight. The sun is high enough to make shadows short and direct, almost directly beneath objects and people. Everything appears sharper in this light. Edges are clearer. Surfaces more defined. But even with this clarity, the feeling of the village remains calm. The desert beyond is wide and still. It stretches endlessly, glowing under the midday sun. There is no visible movement in the distance, only the vast openness of sand and sky meeting in a bright, silent horizon. The breeze returns briefly again. It is warmer now, less cooling than earlier in the day, but still moving gently. It passes through the village without urgency, lifting light dust and then disappearing. Inside one home, the woman sits quietly for a moment longer than before. She is not resting fully, but she is still. Her hands are at ease. Her attention is inward for a brief time, as if listening to the natural rhythm of the day around her. There is no need to act immediately. Only to wait. Only to continue when the moment feels right. The child shifts slightly, leaning into the shade. His energy has softened further. The morning's curiosity has settled into a quieter awareness. He observes less now, but feels the heat, the stillness, the gradual slowing of movement around him. The village is not asleep. But it is not fully active either. It exists in a balanced state. A midday pause that grows naturally from the morning's steady rise. The older man stands again and walks slowly through the village. His steps are even, measured. He passes familiar spaces, each one slightly quieter than earlier. Conversations are fewer now, and those that occur are brief and low. He pauses occasionally, but does not stay in one place for long. The village remains in motion. Just in a more restrained form. At the field, the man working there completes another careful check of the irrigation path. Everything is functioning as it should be. The plants are stable. The soil is balanced. The water continues its slow journey without interruption. He steps back for a moment, observing the field as a whole. There is no need to change anything further. Only to maintain. Only to watch. The sun continues its steady path across the sky. Midday is approaching fully now, though not yet at its peak intensity. The light remains strong, filling every space with clarity and warmth. The village adjusts once more. People settle into shade. Movement slows slightly. The rhythm becomes even more measured than before. And in this quiet, steady adaptation, the desert village continues its life without interruption. Held gently beneath the bright, unwavering sky of approaching midday. Next part 18. Midday settles more fully over the desert now. The sun is high and steady, holding its place in the wide sky with a firm brightness that touches everything below. The light is no longer soft or shifting. It is direct, clear, and constant. The village exists beneath it like something carefully placed in time, unchanged in shape but altered in rhythm. The air is warm. Not overwhelming yet, but strong enough that movement naturally becomes slower, more deliberate. The ground holds heat now, and the sand reflects the sun in pale, steady tones. Within the village, the shift into midday is complete. Life does not stop. It simply quiets. In the shaded interiors, people remain close to walls and coverings that offer relief from the stronger light. The courtyards are less active now, their open spaces used sparingly. Even sound feels reduced, as if the heat itself encourages silence. The child rests in a deeper shade now. He is awake, but still. His earlier curiosity has softened into quiet presence. He sits with his back lightly against a wall, watching the small movements of light that slip through narrow gaps in the structure. These movements are subtle. A thin line of brightness shifting across the ground. A faint change in shadow. Nothing dramatic. Yet he follows them with calm attention. The older man has returned again to a shaded resting place. He sits with a steady posture, not leaning heavily, not fully relaxed either. His gaze is outward, but unfocused. He is not watching anything in particular. He is simply present. Around him, the village continues its subdued midday rhythm. A few people still move between homes, but their pace is slow. Steps are measured. Tasks are short and efficient. Many pause often, resting in shaded corners or near walls where the heat is less direct. Work continues, but in fragments. A small action. A pause. Another small action. At the edge of the village, the cultivated field holds steady under the strong sun. The man tending it moves carefully now, aware of the heat more than earlier in the day. His checks are quicker, more efficient, focused on maintaining balance rather than adjusting frequently. The water channels are still functioning well. He observes them briefly, then steps back into shade for a moment. The plants remain unchanged in appearance. They do not react quickly to the midday heat. They simply continue, rooted and steady, their leaves still holding the quiet persistence of growth. Back in the village, the soundscape has thinned. There are fewer voices now. Fewer movements. The usual rhythm of morning activity has settled into a quieter form of existence, one that holds space rather than fills it. The breeze appears again briefly. It is warm now, but still meaningful. It moves through narrow paths between homes, lifting dust lightly, brushing against walls, then fading without resistance. Inside one home, a faint sound of water being poured can be heard. Slow. Measured. Careful. Even small actions like this feel more deliberate in the midday heat. The woman inside moves with calm efficiency. She does not rush. She does not linger. Each movement is purposeful, conserving energy, aligning with the natural pace of the day. Outside, the child shifts slightly. He adjusts his position in the shade, seeking comfort as the warmth outside grows stronger. His attention drifts between stillness and small details, the sound of distant movement, the changing brightness at the edge of shade, the quiet rhythm of breathing. Everything feels slower now. Not stagnant. Just deeply calm. The older man remains where he is. He closes his eyes for a brief moment, not sleeping fully, but resting in the way that midday often allows. The village around him continues its softened motion. Time feels heavier here. Not in a burdensome way, but in a way that encourages stillness. The sun continues its high position in the sky. Midday is now fully present. The light is at its strongest point so far, though the village has already adapted to it. Shadows are short and close. Surfaces are bright and steady. The desert beyond remains wide and unmoving, holding the heat in silence. There is no urgency in the world at this moment. Everything pauses within the brightness. Everything breathes slowly within the warmth. And the village, as it always does at this time, holds itself gently in balance. Between activity and rest. Between movement and stillness. Between the fullness of day and the quiet that supports it. Next part 19, midday holds the village in a steady, quiet wait. The sun remains high, unmoving in appearance, though it continues its slow, silent path across the sky. Its light is strong now, clear, direct, and evenly spread across the land. The desert and the village exist beneath it in full exposure, yet nothing feels harsh in the way it might from a distance. Instead, it feels familiar, expected, understood. The air is warm. Not changing quickly, but maintaining a consistent heat that shapes how everything moves. Or rather, how everything doesn't move too quickly. Life has settled into its midday form. Inside the homes, shade becomes the center of existence. People gather in the quietest parts of their spaces. Walls block the strongest light, and the interiors feel like small pockets of stillness carved into the brightness outside. Even silence feels different here, deeper, more continuous. The child now lies down for a while. Not asleep fully, but resting. His body stretches out on a woven mat, the coolness of the shaded floor offering relief from the heat outside. His eyes remain open for a time, watching the faint contrast of light and shadow on the walls. Then his eyelids grow heavier. Not forced. Just natural. The older man remains seated, unchanged in posture. He is still awake, but quiet. His presence is steady, almost blending into the environment around him. There is no urgency in his thoughts, no visible intention in his stillness. Only the slow passing of time. Outside, the village is quieter now than it was earlier in the morning. Not empty. Just reduced. A few figures still move between homes, but their steps are slow, careful, and purposeful. Most activity has shifted into smaller, more contained tasks that require less energy. Carrying water in short distances. Adjusting shade coverings. Tending to small, necessary details. Everything is done with efficiency shaped by experience. The cultivated field at the edge of the village rests under the strongest part of the sun. The man tending it has reduced his movements to only what is necessary. He checks the irrigation channels briefly, confirms their steady flow, and steps back into shade when possible. The plants remain still. They do not visibly change in this moment. They endure. That is their rhythm during midday. Endurance. Back in the village, the sounds are faint. Occasional footsteps. The soft movement of cloth. A distant, low exchange of voices that does not carry far. Even the wind seems to hesitate now, passing less frequently than before. When it does appear, it is warm, gentle, and brief, offering no relief, only motion. Inside one home, a small bowl is set down carefully. The sound is almost nothing, but in the quiet of midday, it is noticeable. The woman pauses after placing it, resting her hand on the edge of the surface for a moment. She does not move immediately. She allows herself stillness. This is part of the midday rhythm too. Not just reduced activity, but intentional pause. The child, now resting more deeply, breathes evenly. His earlier awareness of the village has softened into sleep. Not deep night sleep, but the lighter, midday kind where the body rests but remains slightly connected to the world around it. The shade holds him gently. Outside, the brightness continues unchanged. The sky is a wide, unwavering blue. The sun remains at its highest presence, casting short, firm shadows that do not move quickly. Everything feels anchored. The older man opens his eyes again after a long pause. He remains where he is, but his attention shifts slightly outward. He looks across the village as it continues its quiet midday state. There is no change in expression. Only observation. The village remains in its slowed rhythm. Neither fully active nor fully at rest. A balance that belongs only to this part of the day. At the field, the man takes one more careful look at the irrigation channel. Everything continues to function properly. He nods slightly, more to himself than anyone else, and steps back into shade again. No adjustments are needed now. Only maintenance. Only patience. The desert beyond remains vast and still. Its surface glows under the strong light, but nothing moves there except the heat itself, rising faintly in the distance, bending the horizon in subtle waves. Inside the village, time feels stretched. Not slow in a frustrating way, but steady, continuous, almost suspended. Moments pass without urgency. People rest, resume small tasks, pause again. The cycle does not break. It only softens. And in this softened midday stillness, the village continues to exist in its quiet, balanced form. Held gently beneath the unwavering desert sun. Next part 20 midday remains steady, as if the world has paused within its brightest hour. The sun is still high, holding the sky in a clear, unbroken blue. Its light is strong, but not new anymore. It has settled into the land, into the walls of the village, into the sand itself. Everything carries its presence now, as if the day has quietly spread through all things and chosen to stay. The village continues in its softened rhythm. There is no beginning to new activity here at this hour, and no ending either. Only continuation in its quietest form. Inside the homes, the shade feels deeper now, not because the light has changed, but because the eyes have adjusted fully to the contrast. The interiors become places of gentle stillness, where sound is minimal and movement is rare. The child sleeps more deeply now. His breathing is steady, slow, and even. One arm rests loosely across his body, the other beside him on the mat. The heat outside does not reach him here. The shade holds him in a kind of calm suspension. Time passes, but it does not disturb him. Nearby, the woman also rests in quiet stillness. Not fully asleep, not fully awake. Her eyes are closed for a time, then slightly open, then closed again. This in-between state is common in midday. It is not rest as in the night, but something lighter, softer, shaped by heat and habit. Outside, the village continues its reduced motion. A few people move slowly through narrow paths, staying close to walls where shade lingers longer. Their steps are careful, unhurried. They do not stay in open spaces for long. Everything is designed around the sun's position now. Not through planning, but through lived understanding. The older man remains seated in his shaded place. He does not speak. He does not move often. His presence is steady, like part of the space itself. He watches without focusing, aware of the village without needing to follow any specific detail. At this hour, observation itself becomes a form of rest. The cultivated field at the edge of the village holds its quiet endurance. The man tending it has reduced his activity further. He checks only what is necessary, then stands back in shade. The irrigation continues to move gently through its paths, carrying water in a slow, controlled flow. The plants remain unchanged in appearance. But they are not inactive. They are waiting. Responding in ways too subtle to see at this moment. The desert beyond the village remains still under the full weight of midday light. Heat rises faintly from the sand, creating a soft distortion near the horizon. The distant view appears slightly blurred, as if the land is breathing in slow waves of warmth. Nothing moves quickly. Even the air feels heavy, though not uncomfortable, just present, thickened by the sun's full attention. Inside the village, sound is minimal. A faint shifting of fabric. A quiet step across a shaded courtyard. The distant sound of something being placed down carefully. These are the only disturbances in an otherwise continuous silence. And even these sounds feel softened, absorbed by the heat and stillness. The breeze appears briefly again. It is warm, carrying no coolness, but still appreciated for its movement. It passes between buildings, lifts lightly at loose cloth, then disappears without effect. The village does not expect relief. It only adjusts. Inside one home, a small change occurs. The woman opens her eyes fully now, sitting up slowly. There is no urgency in her movement. She adjusts her position slightly, then remains still for a moment, as if re-entering awareness at her own pace. Her gaze turns toward the doorway. Outside, the light is strong and unwavering. She does not step out yet. She simply observes. The child shifts slightly in his sleep. A small movement of the shoulder. Then stillness again. The midday rest continues uninterrupted. The older man finally closes his eyes for a longer moment. Not sleep, but deeper rest than before. His breathing remains even. His posture unchanged. The shade around him holds steady, filtering the harshest part of the light. Time passes without notice. No one measures it here. It simply moves forward, carrying the village with it. The sun remains fixed in its high position, marking the center of the day. But even at its peak, it does not feel unchanging. There is always a subtle shift in warmth, in angle, in presence. The desert is never fully still, even when it appears so. And the village, resting within the stillness, continues its quiet midday existence. Balanced between heat and shade. Between movement and pause. Between the fullness of the sun and the patience of those who live beneath it, midday remains steady, as if the world has paused within its brightest hour. The sun is still high, holding the sky in a clear, unbroken blue. Its light is strong, but not new anymore. It has settled into the land, into the walls of the village, into the sand itself. Everything carries its presence now, as if the day has quietly spread through all things and chosen to stay. The village continues in its softened rhythm. There is no beginning to new activity here at this hour, and no ending either. Only continuation in its quietest form. Inside the homes, the shade feels deeper now, not because the light has changed, but because the eyes have adjusted fully to the contrast. The interiors become places of gentle stillness, where sound is minimal and movement is rare. The child sleeps more deeply now. His breathing is steady, slow, and even. One arm rests loosely across his body, the other beside him on the mat. The heat outside does not reach him here. The shade holds him in a kind of calm suspension. Time passes, but it does not disturb him. Nearby, the woman also rests in quiet stillness. Not fully asleep, not fully awake. Her eyes are closed for a time, then slightly open, then closed again. This in-between state is common in midday. It is not rest as in the night, but something lighter, softer, shaped by heat and habit. Outside, the village continues its reduced motion. A few people move slowly through narrow paths, staying close to walls where shade lingers longer. Their steps are careful, unhurried. They do not stay in open spaces for long. Everything is designed around the sun's position now. Not through planning, but through lived understanding. The older man remains seated in his shaded place. He does not speak. He does not move often. His presence is steady, like part of the space itself. He watches without focusing, aware of the village without needing to follow any specific detail. At this hour, observation itself becomes a form of rest. The cultivated field at the edge of the village holds its quiet endurance. The man tending it has reduced his activity further. He checks only what is necessary, then stands back in shade. The irrigation continues to move gently through its paths, carrying water in a slow, controlled flow. The plants remain unchanged in appearance. But they are not inactive. They are waiting. Responding in ways too subtle to see at this moment. The desert beyond the village remains still under the full weight of midday light. Heat rises faintly from the sand, creating a soft distortion near the horizon. The distant view appears slightly blurred, as if the land is breathing in slow waves of warmth. Nothing moves quickly. Even the air feels heavy, though not uncomfortable, just present, thickened by the sun's full attention. Inside the village, sound is minimal. A faint shifting of fabric. A quiet step across a shaded courtyard. The distant sound of something being placed down carefully. These are the only disturbances in an otherwise continuous silence. And even these sounds feel softened, absorbed by the heat and stillness. The breeze appears briefly again. It is warm, carrying no coolness, but still appreciated for its movement. It passes between buildings, lifts lightly at loose cloth, then disappears without effect. The village does not expect relief. It only adjusts. Inside one home, a small change occurs. The woman opens her eyes fully now, sitting up slowly. There is no urgency in her movement. She adjusts her position slightly, then remains still for a moment, as if re-entering awareness at her own pace. Her gaze turns toward the doorway. Outside, the light is strong and unwavering. She does not step out yet. She simply observes. The child shifts slightly in his sleep. A small movement of the shoulder. Then stillness again. The midday rest continues uninterrupted. The older man finally closes his eyes for a longer moment. Not sleep, but deeper rest than before. His breathing remains even. His posture unchanged. The shade around him holds steady, filtering the harshest part of the light. Time passes without notice. No one measures it here. It simply moves forward, carrying the village with it. The sun remains fixed in its high position, marking the center of the day. But even at its peak, it does not feel unchanging. There is always a subtle shift in warmth, in angle, in presence. The desert is never fully still, even when it appears so. And the village, resting within the stillness, continues its quiet midday existence. Balanced between heat and shade. Between movement and pause. Between the fullness of the sun and the patience of those who live beneath it. Next part 21. Midday begins to shift, almost imperceptibly at first. The sun is still high, still strong, still holding the desert in its full brightness, but something subtle has changed in its feeling. It no longer feels like it is rising toward its peak. Instead, it feels as if it has reached it and is now beginning, very slowly, to lean forward into the next phase of the day. The village does not react to this shift. It simply exists within it. Inside the shaded homes, the stillness remains deep and steady. The child stirs slightly in his rest. Not waking fully, but moving through a lighter layer of sleep. His hand shifts, then settles again. His breathing changes for a moment, then returns to its calm rhythm. The shade around him feels constant, protecting him from the strongest part of the light outside. The woman nearby opens her eyes again. This time, she remains awake. She sits quietly, letting her awareness return gradually. There is no urgency in her movement. She does not stand immediately. She simply sits, observing the soft shadows inside the room. Outside, the village begins to show the earliest signs of renewed motion. Not activity yet. Just readiness. A few people move from shaded rest into slow, deliberate tasks. A container is lifted. A cloth is adjusted. A door is opened slightly wider to allow air to pass through. Everything remains measured. Everything remains careful. The older man shifts his position under the shade. He opens his eyes fully now, looking out across the village again. The light outside is unchanged in intensity, but the angle of it carries a subtle difference that marks the passage of time. He notices it without needing to think about it. This is how time is understood here. Not by measurement, but by feeling. At the edge of the cultivated field, the man tending the plants begins another round of careful observation. The sun is still strong overhead, but its position has moved enough that shadows are slightly different now. He checks the water channels again, ensuring their flow remains steady and balanced. A small adjustment is made. Then he steps back. The plants remain unchanged in appearance, but their survival continues to depend on this quiet attention. Nothing here is left unattended. Everything is maintained through patience. Back in the village, the sounds begin to return very slowly. Not many. Not loud. But present. A faint exchange of voices between two people passing each other. The soft sound of footsteps moving across packed earth. The distant movement of objects being arranged or carried. These sounds do not disrupt the midday calm. They simply exist within it. The breeze returns again. Slightly cooler than before, though still warm. It moves more confidently now, as if the worst of the midday heat is beginning to ease. It passes through open courtyards, across narrow paths, then fades into stillness again. Inside one home, the woman stands fully now. She adjusts her clothing, smooths a surface nearby, and pauses. Her movements are unhurried. She listens briefly to the outside sounds, then looks toward the doorway. The light beyond is still strong, but different in tone. The child sits up again, slowly waking from his midday rest. His eyes open gradually, adjusting to the dim interior light. He does not move quickly. He sits quietly for a moment, letting awareness return in its own time. The older man rises after a long pause. He steps out from the shade into a slightly brighter part of the courtyard. The light touches him more directly now, but it no longer feels like the peak of midday. There is a shift. Subtle, but real. The village begins to feel it collectively, even without words. This is the turning point of the day. Not yet afternoon, but no longer the deepest midday. At the field, the man stands still for a moment longer than before. He looks across the land, noticing the faint change in light. The irrigation continues its steady flow. The plants remain stable, unchanged, enduring. He does not need to intervene. Only observe. Only continue. In the village, more people begin to emerge from shaded rest. The movement is still slow, still careful, but it is returning. The rhythm shifts slightly away from complete stillness, toward gentle activity once more. The sun remains bright, but its intensity is no longer increasing. It is holding, and beginning, almost imperceptibly, to soften. The desert around the village reflects this change in subtle ways. The heat in the air is still present, but it no longer feels like it is building. The horizon remains steady, the sand glowing under the light, but with a slightly gentler tone than before. Time continues forward. Slowly. Quietly. Without interruption. And the village, sensing the shift without needing to name it, begins to move again within the softened edge of midday. Preparing, gently and quietly, for the slow approach of afternoon. Next part 22. The afternoon begins without announcing itself. There is no clear line between midday and what comes after it. Only a quiet easing, as if the world has been holding still for a long time and is now learning, slowly, how to move again. The sun is still high, but its presence feels different now. Less intense in its weight. More settled in its position. The village senses this change in the way it senses all time, not through sudden shifts, but through small differences in light, in heat, in the way shadows rest on the ground. Inside the homes, movement becomes a little more regular again. Not fast. Not busy. Just more continuous than before. The woman steps outside briefly, then pauses in the shade near the doorway. She looks across the village, letting her eyes adjust to the brightness after the darker interior. She does not stay long in the direct light. She simply checks the feel of the day, then returns inside. The child now sits fully awake. His midday sleep has faded completely, leaving behind a quiet, calm alertness. He does not rush into activity. He remains in place for a while, watching the slow changes of light around him. His world feels different now than it did earlier. Lighter in some ways. More open again. The older man begins to walk once more through the village. His pace is unchanged, steady, unhurried, but the village around him feels slightly more active than before. People have begun to re-emerge from the deeper shade of midday rest. Small tasks resume in open courtyards and narrow paths. There is a sense of return. Not to mourning, but to motion. At the edge of the cultivated field, the man resumes more attentive work. The sun is still strong, but the sharpest edge of heat has softened. He notices this immediately in the soil beneath his hands. It is warm, but no longer at its highest intensity. He checks the water channels again. The flow remains steady. He adjusts nothing this time. Only observes. The plants continue their quiet endurance, unchanged in appearance but alive in their slow, hidden processes. The afternoon rhythm is not as restrained as midday. But it is not yet fully open. It exists in a gentle in-between state, where work and rest begin to overlap again in a more fluid way. Back in the village, the sounds gradually return. Not many at first. Then more. Footsteps across open ground. Soft voices exchanged between neighbors. The faint movement of tools being lifted again after rest. There is no urgency in any of it. Only continuation. The breeze becomes more noticeable now. It moves more freely through the village, no longer weighed down by the peak heat of midday. It is still warm, but it carries a slight easing, a subtle promise of relief that is not yet fully realized. It passes through doorways, across walls, over sand-covered paths. Then fades. Inside one home, the woman sits again, now engaged in light work. Her movements are slow but steady. She organizes small items, repositions objects, prepares spaces for the remainder of the day. Each action is simple, familiar, and done without thought of time. Time here is not chased. It is followed. The child steps outside again, this time into partial shade. He squints slightly at the brightness, then adjusts quickly. His attention turns to the village around him, which now feels more active than earlier in the day. People are moving again, but calmly. The village is waking from its midday pause, but not rushing into anything. It is simply continuing. The older man pauses beneath a shaded overhang once more. He watches the village as it transitions into afternoon rhythm. There is no change in expression. Only a quiet awareness of the flow of time. At the field, the man stands for a moment longer than usual. He looks across the land, then begins slow, careful movement again. Not because it is urgent, but because it is time. The irrigation still flows. The plants still endure. Everything remains connected through attention and care. The sun begins its slow descent from its highest point. Not noticeably at first, but steadily. The light becomes slightly less sharp, slightly more angled. Shadows begin to stretch just a little longer than before, no longer compressed tightly beneath objects. The desert begins to breathe differently again. Not cooler yet, but less intense. The village responds without awareness. Doors remain open longer. Movements extend slightly. Rest and work blend more evenly than in the stillness of midday. There is a softness returning to the rhythm. A gradual easing. The afternoon is not dramatic. It does not arrive loudly. It simply spreads through the village, step by step, moment by moment, until everything exists within its quieter flow. And the desert village, steady beneath the lowering sun, continues its day in this calm, unbroken rhythm. Gently moving forward into the slow heart of afternoon. Next part 23. The afternoon settles more deeply now, as if the day has found its second breath. The sun is still bright, still present in the wide sky, but it no longer feels like it is pressing down with the same intensity. Its light stretches across the village at a softer angle now, creating longer shadows that lean gently across the sand and between the narrow paths. Everything begins to feel slightly more open again. Not cooler yet, but easier to move within. Inside the village, the rhythm becomes more continuous. The long pause of midday has fully passed, and life now flows forward again in a calm, steady stream. People move between homes and open spaces with renewed but gentle energy. Tasks that were paused are now resumed without urgency. A container is carried across a courtyard. A doorway is adjusted and left open. A quiet conversation begins and ends without delay. There is no rush in any direction. Only return. The child now walks more freely again through the village paths. His steps are lighter than earlier in the day, more engaged with the world around him. He moves between shade and light, noticing how the afternoon changes the color of everything it touches. The sand looks different now. Warmer in tone. Softer in brightness. The older man continues his slow movement through familiar spaces. He does not linger long in any one place. He passes through the village as he has done many times before, observing the subtle changes that come with the shifting light. There is a quiet understanding in his presence. He does not need to ask anything of the day. He simply moves with it. At the cultivated field, the man resumes more consistent work. The afternoon light is gentler on the land than the peak of midday. The soil holds its warmth but no longer feels harsh. The irrigation continues its steady path, carrying water through narrow channels with quiet precision. He checks the flow again. Everything remains balanced. No adjustment is needed. He steps back and watches for a moment longer. The plants remain still in appearance, but they exist in their own slow rhythm of life, responding to the changing light in ways too subtle to see directly. Back in the village, the soundscape becomes richer again. Not loud, but fuller than during midday. Footsteps return with more regularity. Soft calls between people reappear. The gentle movement of tools, containers, and cloth adds a quiet texture to the air. The village feels alive again in a more complete way. Not divided between rest and activity, but blending both. The breeze returns more consistently now. It is still warm, but carries a noticeable softness compared to earlier hours. It moves across open courtyards, through narrow alleys, lifting dust in thin, drifting patterns before fading again. Inside one home, the woman now steps out fully into the afternoon light. She pauses at the doorway, letting her eyes adjust. The brightness is still strong, but no longer overwhelming. She looks across the village for a moment, then begins to walk slowly along a familiar path. Her movement is steady and calm. Each step unhurried. The child now joins a small group of others again. They move together loosely through shaded and open areas, not with structure, but with shared presence. Their interactions are brief glances, small gestures, occasional quiet words. There is no fixed purpose in their movement. Only exploration of the afternoon space. The older man pauses again beneath shade. He watches as the village continues to shift gently around him. The afternoon light now stretches farther across the ground, shaping the world in longer, softer lines. Time feels less compressed now. More open. More flowing. At the field, the man completes another slow inspection of the irrigation system. The water continues its path without interruption. The plants remain steady under the afternoon sun. He stands still for a moment, then turns slightly toward the village, observing it from a distance. Everything is in its place. Everything continues. The sun lowers just a fraction more. Not enough to signal evening, but enough to mark the gentle progression of the day. Shadows lengthen again, stretching more noticeably now across the sand and walls. The heat remains, but it is no longer at its peak strength. It begins to soften, slowly, like a held breath being released. The village responds without conscious thought. Movement becomes a little more fluid. Pauses become a little more frequent. The balance of the day begins to shift once more. And within this quiet, steady transformation, the desert village continues to live its afternoon. Held gently between the lingering warmth of midday and the slow approach of evening. Next part 24. The afternoon continues its slow descent, almost without anyone noticing the exact moment it changes. The sun is still above the village, still bright, but it no longer feels like it is holding the sky in place. Instead, it feels like it is gradually releasing it, allowing the light to soften as it spreads across the land. Shadows grow longer now. Not quickly. Just enough to be noticed when someone pauses and looks. Inside the village, the rhythm has become more open again. The earlier stillness of midday has fully dissolved, leaving behind a gentle flow of movement. People now move with slightly more ease between shaded and open spaces, adjusting their pace to match the easing heat. There is no rush returning to the day. Only continuity. The child walks slowly through a familiar path again. He no longer stays in one place for long. His attention shifts between small details: the movement of cloth in the breeze, the changing angle of sunlight on a wall, the sound of distant work resuming in the field. The world feels more active again, but still calm. always calm. The older man continues his steady presence through the village. He pauses occasionally beneath shade, then resumes walking. His movements are unchanged, but the environment around him is subtly different now. The village feels more awake than it did during midday, yet still far from the energy of morning. It exists in a quieter afternoon state. Balanced. Measured. At the cultivated field, the man working there continues his careful routine. The sun is lower than before, and the soil has begun to cool ever so slightly. Not noticeably at first, but enough that long experience makes it clear. He checks the water channels again. The flow remains steady. No adjustment is needed. He simply watches for a moment, then continues his slow movement along the edge of the field. The plants stand unchanged in appearance. But the afternoon light now touches them differently, casting softer highlights along their edges, as if outlining their quiet persistence. Back in the village, sounds return in gentle layers. Footsteps on earth. Low conversation between neighbors. The soft movement of objects being carried or placed. Even the air feels less heavy than before, carrying a slight easing that suggests the heat is beginning its long withdrawal. The breeze becomes more frequent. It moves through the village with greater presence now, slipping between buildings, crossing open courtyards, and stirring the edges of shade. It does not cool the air fully, but it signals change. A slow turning of the day. Inside one home, the woman continues her light work. Her movements are steady, almost meditative. She organizes, adjusts, and pauses between actions, allowing moments of stillness to rest naturally between tasks. She does not look at time. She feels it. The child now sits briefly in a shaded area again. He is quieter than before, more settled in his movements. The afternoon energy has softened his pace. He watches others pass by, then turns his attention to the shifting light on the ground. The older man finds shade once more and remains still. He observes the village as it moves through its afternoon rhythm. There is a subtle change in how people move now, less compressed than midday, more extended than morning. The day is opening again. But gently. Always gently. At the field, the man finishes another slow check of the irrigation. Everything remains in balance. The water flows. The plants endure. The land continues its quiet agreement with time. He stands for a longer moment, then steps back into shade, letting the afternoon settle around him. The sun continues its descent. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But steadily, without pause. The light grows warmer in tone now, less white, more golden. Shadows stretch further across the sand, creating longer shapes that move slowly as the sun changes position. The desert begins to feel different again. Not in temperature alone, but in atmosphere. There is a softness returning to the world. A gentle easing that belongs to the later part of the day. Inside the village, movement becomes more evenly spread. No longer concentrated in bursts of activity. Instead, a continuous, flowing rhythm that feels natural and unforced. People move, pause, speak, and rest in small cycles that fit together without effort. Everything aligns with the slow shift of the afternoon. The breeze passes again. It is warmer than earlier, but carries a familiar comfort. It moves across the village and fades, leaving behind stillness that feels less heavy than before. The child stands again and walks a short distance. He does not go far. He simply moves through the familiar paths, observing how the light has changed since earlier in the day. Everything feels slightly different now. Softer. Less intense. more open. The older man rises once more and continues walking. The village around him is in quiet motion, preparing without knowing it for the final transition of the day. There is no urgency in this preparation. Only continuation. Only flow. And as the sun slowly lowers further into the sky, the desert village moves deeper into its late afternoon rhythm, where light begins to soften, and the long approach of evening quietly begins. Next part 25. Late afternoon settles over the village like a gentle easing of breath. The sun has lowered further now, no longer sitting high and firm in the sky, but beginning its long, quiet descent toward the horizon. The light it casts is softer than before, warmer in color, less sharp in contrast, spreading across the land in longer, more delicate lines. The desert changes with it. Not suddenly, but steadily. The heat that once filled the middle of the day has begun to loosen its grip. The air still holds warmth, but it is no longer pressing. It feels lighter, more forgiving, as if the world is slowly releasing what it held tightly at midday. Inside the village, movement continues in a calm, familiar rhythm. People no longer move in the careful restraint of midday or the structured return of early afternoon. Instead, there is a steadier flow, now balanced, unhurried, and quietly coordinated through habit. Work continues in small ways. Not urgent. Just necessary. The child walks more slowly now, his steps less exploratory than earlier. He moves through familiar paths, occasionally stopping to watch how the afternoon light stretches across the ground. Shadows are longer now, softer at the edges, blending gently into the sand. Everything feels more open again. Less confined by heat. Less shaped by stillness. The older man continues his slow path through the village. He pauses often, not from fatigue, but from quiet observation. The village around him has shifted once more. There is more movement now than at midday, but it carries a different tone, calmer, more reflective. As if the day is beginning to look back on itself. At the cultivated field, the man working there notices the change in light immediately. The sun's angle has shifted enough that the soil no longer feels as intensely warm under direct exposure. He continues his careful routine, but with less constraint than earlier in the day. The irrigation flows steadily. No adjustments are needed now. The plants remain unchanged in appearance, but the afternoon light gives them a softer outline, as if the edges of everything are gently dissolving into the warmth of the day. He stands still for a moment longer than usual. Then continues. Back in the village, sounds begin to return in fuller presence. Not loud, but more continuous than before. Footsteps across open courtyards. Soft conversations that last a little longer. The faint sound of tools being set aside and picked up again as tasks transition into later day work. The breeze becomes more consistent now. It moves through the village with a steady rhythm, no longer hesitant, no longer brief. It carries warmth, but also relief, the first clear sign that the day is moving toward evening. Inside one home, the woman pauses her work and sits for a moment near the doorway. She does not step outside fully. She simply sits where shade and light meet. She watches the shifting balance of the afternoon outside, how the light stretches further, how shadows lengthen across the ground, how the village slowly adjusts without effort. The child now sits beside others again. Their movements are slower than earlier in the day. There is less wandering now, more resting, more quiet observation. The energy of the afternoon has softened them into a calmer state. They speak occasionally, then fall silent again. The older man finds shade once more and remains still. His gaze rests across the village. The same spaces he has seen all day now appear different under the late afternoon light. Familiar places feel slightly transformed, not changed, but gently redefined by angle and warmth. Time feels wider here now. Less compressed. More flowing. At the field, the man completes another slow inspection. Everything remains stable. The water continues its path. The plants remain steady in their quiet endurance. He steps back fully now, allowing the field to exist on its own for a while without intervention. There is a sense of completion in his posture, though nothing final has ended. Only a pause within continuation. The sun lowers further. Not quickly. Not noticeably in a single moment. But gradually, as it always does. The sky begins to shift in tone. The deep brightness of midday has softened into a warmer, golden light that stretches across the entire landscape. The desert reflects this change in long, gentle gradients of color. Everything feels touched by transition. The village senses it without needing to name it. Movement becomes slightly more relaxed. Rest becomes more frequent. Work becomes quieter. And the rhythm of the day begins to tilt gently toward its final phase. The breeze passes through once more. It carries the warmth of the sun but also the promise of its slow retreat. It moves across open spaces, through shaded corners, then disappears into stillness again. Inside the village, life continues in this softened balance. No urgency. No stillness. Only flow. The child stands again and walks a few steps alone, then pauses. He looks toward the horizon where the light is beginning to change more noticeably now. The afternoon is no longer holding steady, it is moving. The older man rises once more and continues his slow walk. The village around him remains alive in quiet motion, shaped by the steady descent of the sun. Everything continues. Everything shifts. And as late afternoon deepens further, the desert village moves gently forward. Toward the calm, golden threshold where day begins to soften into evening. Next part 26. Late afternoon now begins to feel closer to evening, even if the sky still holds plenty of light. The sun has lowered further, and its angle has changed enough that everything in the village is now shaped by longer, softer shadows. They stretch across the sand in slow lines, no longer short and direct like midday, but extended and calm, as if the day itself is gently leaning toward rest. The brightness is still there. But it no longer feels sharp. It feels warm, golden, and patient. Inside the village, the rhythm continues in a quieter, more reflective form. People move with less urgency now, and more continuity. Tasks that were begun earlier are either completed or slowly winding down. There is a natural sense of closing within the day, not through stopping, but through soft reduction. The child walks slowly through a shaded path. He pauses often now, not from curiosity alone, but from a kind of calm awareness that the day is changing again. The light on the ground shifts as he moves, brighter in some places, muted in others, depending on where shadows fall. Everything feels familiar, but slightly different. The older man continues his steady movement through the village. His pace remains unchanged, but the world around him is now clearly in transition. He notices how people linger a little longer in conversations, how movements are less hurried, how pauses feel more natural than before. The village is no longer in the middle of the day. It is entering its later breath. At the cultivated field, the man working there now stands for longer periods between actions. The irrigation still flows gently, and he watches it without needing to adjust anything. The soil holds its warmth, but it is no longer intense under the lowering sun. The plants stand in quiet rows, unchanged in form, but now seen under a softer light that gives them a different presence, less sharp, more calm. He rests his hands briefly, then lets them fall to his sides. There is no more immediate work needed here. Only observation. Only completion of another quiet cycle. Back in the village, sound returns in a more continuous way. Not louder, but steadier. Footsteps move across open courtyards. Doors are opened and closed with slower rhythm. Soft voices carry between homes, no longer broken into short exchanges, but allowed to linger slightly longer. The breeze becomes more noticeable again. It is gentle now, and carries the feeling of cooling, not fully cool, but less warm than before. It moves through the village in steady waves, passing over sand, cloth, and skin, then fading again into stillness. Inside one home, the woman stands near the doorway for a longer moment. She does not step out immediately. She simply watches the changing light outside. The courtyard is bathed in warm tones now, shadows stretching farther than before. She remains still, observing the shift. The child now sits again with others. Their movements are quiet, relaxed, and slow. There is less activity than earlier in the afternoon. Instead, there is a shared stillness that comes and goes naturally between brief moments of movement. No one speaks loudly. Everything remains soft. The older man finds shade and pauses once more. He looks across the village as it continues its slow transition toward evening. The same paths he has seen all day now appear different again under the lower sun. The light reshapes everything it touches, without changing its essence. Time feels longer now. Not stretched, but gently expanded. At the field, the man steps away completely from active work. There is nothing more to adjust. The system he has maintained throughout the day continues on its own steady balance. He stands at the edge for a final moment, then turns toward the village. His work is not finished in a dramatic sense. It is simply resting now. As the day itself moves forward, the sun continues its descent. The sky warms in color, shifting gradually from bright gold toward deeper, softer tones. The desert reflects this change in long gradients of light and shadow, as if the entire landscape is slowly being painted anew. Everything becomes more gentle, more diffuse, more calm. Inside the village, life continues in its late afternoon rhythm. People begin to think less about tasks and more about completion. There is a quiet sense that the day is nearing its softer end, even though there is still time before night arrives. The child walks a few steps, then stops again near a shaded wall. He looks upward briefly, then back at the ground, noticing how the world feels different under this lower light. The older man continues his slow path. He does not hurry. He does not stop for long. He simply moves as the village moves, as the day moves, as everything gradually leans toward evening. And as the sun lowers further into the sky, the desert village enters the quiet edge of late afternoon, where everything softens, and the world begins to prepare for the slow arrival of dusk. Late afternoon now begins to dissolve gently into the first feeling of evening. The change is not sudden. It never is here. It arrives slowly, like a soft shift in the air that is noticed only after it has already begun. The sun is lower now, and its light no longer fills the sky evenly. Instead, it stretches across the village in long, angled streams, touching walls, sand, and rooftops with a golden softness that feels almost quiet in itself. The heat is fading. Not quickly, but steadily, like something that is slowly being set down after a long day of holding. Inside the village, the rhythm becomes more peaceful again. Not inactive, just calmer. People begin to complete their remaining tasks with less urgency. There is a natural sense of closing in the air, not as an ending, but as a gentle winding down. Movements slow slightly. Pauses grow a little longer. Conversations soften further. Everything feels closer to stillness than before. The child now walks more slowly than earlier, his steps unhurried and light. He moves through narrow paths where the afternoon light filters in at long angles, creating patterns across the ground that shift as he passes. He stops occasionally, watching these patterns without speaking. The world feels different again. Not new, but changed in feeling. The older man continues his steady walk through the village. He does not rush, and he does not linger too long in any one place. His presence remains constant, part of the village's quiet structure as the day continues its slow descent. He notices how the air feels lighter now. Not cool yet, but no longer heavy with midday warmth. At the cultivated field, the man has fully stepped away from active tending. He stands at the edge now, observing the land without intervention. The irrigation continues its slow, steady movement, unchanged and reliable. The plants remain still under the softening light. Their outlines are now more golden, touched by the beginning tones of evening. He watches for a moment longer, then turns away. The work of the field settles into quiet completion for the day. Back in the village, the soundscape becomes softer again. There is less movement than earlier in the afternoon. Fewer footsteps. Fewer exchanges. But what remains is steady and calm, not empty. The village is not stopping. It is simply slowing. The breeze becomes more consistent now. It carries a clearer sense of relief compared to earlier hours. Still warm, but no longer heavy. It moves gently through open spaces, across courtyards, between homes, then fades into stillness again. Inside one home, the woman moves more slowly now. She completes small tasks, then pauses more frequently between them. Her attention is not fixed on any urgency. Instead, it rests comfortably in the quiet rhythm of late afternoon. She occasionally looks outside. Each time, the light has shifted slightly more toward evening. The child now sits near a shaded wall again. He no longer wanders far. His energy has softened into calm observation. He watches the long shadows stretch across the ground, noticing how they change with every passing moment. Everything feels slower now. But not stagnant. Alive, in a quieter way. The older man pauses beneath shade again. He looks across the village, which now feels distinctly different than it did even an hour ago. The light is warmer in tone, but less intense. Shadows are longer, softer at the edges, blending into the sand more gently. Time feels more spacious here. Less structured. More flowing. At the field, there is nothing left to tend. Only the memory of the day's work remains in the soil, the water, and the plants that continue their quiet existence. The man stands still for a final moment, then begins to walk back toward the village. His steps are slow, matching the growing calm of the afternoon. The sun continues its descent. Now clearly moving toward the horizon. The sky begins to deepen in color, not yet dusk, but no longer bright day. The golden tones grow richer, warmer, and slightly more diffuse. The desert reflects this change in soft gradients of light and shadow. Everything feels gently stretched. Everything feels more open. Inside the village, movement becomes even more sparse. People now move mostly to finish, not to begin. The day is no longer expanding. It is contracting gently toward its close. Still, there is no urgency. Only continuation. The child stands once more and walks a few slow steps, then stops again, looking toward the horizon where the light is now clearly shifting. The older man resumes his slow path, moving with the same calm rhythm he has held all day. The village remains alive, but in a quieter tone now. Less about doing, more about easing. And as the sun lowers further, bringing the first true softness of evening closer, the desert village continues its gentle passage forward into the calm, golden threshold between day and night. Next part 28. The approach of evening becomes clearer now, though it still arrives without any sharp edge. The sun is lower, resting closer to the horizon, and its light has changed in character. It no longer spreads evenly across the sky. Instead, it gathers in warmer tones, gold deepening into soft amber, washing over the village in long, quiet layers. Everything feels slower now. Not because anything has stopped, but because the day itself is easing. Inside the village, activity has shifted into its final forms. The earlier movement of the afternoon is now replaced by quieter finishing tasks. People close spaces that were open during the day. Objects are returned to their places. Small routines that mark the end of work begin to appear naturally in different homes at different times. There is no shared signal, only shared understanding. The child now moves more slowly than before, staying closer to shaded areas. He no longer wanders widely. His steps are small, unhurried, and thoughtful in their own quiet way. He watches the changing sky often now, noticing how the color deepens gradually, how the light softens as it spreads across the sand. The older man continues his steady presence through the village. His movement remains unchanged, but the world around him feels distinctly different again. The village is no longer in the brightness of afternoon. It is now fully within the gentle descent toward evening. He pauses more often. Not because he is tired, but because the day invites stillness more frequently now. At the cultivated field, the man who worked there earlier is now fully returning toward the village. His steps are slow, matching the quiet tone of the evening approach. The field behind him is still and complete for the day. The irrigation continues its steady flow without intervention, and the plants stand under the softening light. Nothing more is required there now. Only time. Only continuation. Back in the village, the sounds have thinned further. Footsteps are fewer. Voices are lower. Even the movement of objects feels quieter, as if everything is being handled with a little more care than before. The breeze returns again, now noticeably cooler than earlier in the afternoon. It moves gently through open courtyards and narrow paths, lifting the edges of fabric and carrying with it the first real sense of evening's arrival. It does not linger long. It comes, then passes, then leaves behind a calm stillness. Inside one home, the woman now completes her final small tasks for the day. She pauses between each action more frequently. Her movements are unhurried, almost reflective. She occasionally looks outside, where the light continues to shift toward deeper tones. She does not rush to finish. There is no need. The child now sits quietly again in a shaded area. His attention is calmer than before, no longer moving quickly between details. He simply sits, observing the slow transformation of the village as it prepares for evening. The shadows are long now. They stretch across courtyards and walls in gentle, elongated shapes that move slowly as the sun continues its descent. Everything feels more drawn out, more spacious. The older man finds shade and remains still for a longer period now. He looks across the village, which is now clearly in its late-day rhythm. The energy of the afternoon has fully softened into something quieter, more inward. Time feels different here. Less like progression. More like settling. The sky continues to change. The golden tones deepen further, moving toward richer shades of orange and soft red near the horizon. Above, the blue begins to lose its brightness, slowly transitioning into a deeper, calmer tone. The desert mirrors this shift. Its surface now glows with warm, fading light, and the distant edges of the landscape soften into gentle silhouettes. The village is no longer active in the way it was earlier. But it is not still. It exists in a quiet, in-between state where the day is almost complete, but not yet gone. The child stands once more and walks a few steps toward the edge of shade, then stops again, looking outward. The older man resumes his slow movement, continuing through familiar paths one more time as the evening deepens. Everything feels like it is approaching a natural pause. Not an ending, but a resting point within the flow of time. And as the sun continues its gentle descent toward the horizon, the desert village moves quietly into the soft beginning of evening, where light fades slowly, and the world prepares to become still once again. Next part 29 evening arrives in a way that is almost unnoticeable at first. It does not step into the village. It spreads. Slowly. Softly. As if the day has finally begun to relax after holding itself open for so long. The sun is now close to the horizon, and its light has transformed completely. The brightness of midday is gone, replaced by long, warm tones that drift across the village in quiet waves of gold and amber. Everything feels closer now. Not physically, but in feeling. As if the world has gently drawn itself inward. Inside the village, movement becomes even slower. The day's remaining tasks are nearly complete, and what remains is carried out with calm familiarity. People move less often between spaces now. Instead, they stay longer where they are, finishing small actions before letting them rest. There is no urgency left in the day. Only quiet closure. The child now sits near a doorway where the last of the sunlight touches the ground. He watches the light shift across the earth in long, soft lines. The shadows are stretched far now, reaching across paths and walls like gentle reminders that the day is nearing its end. He does not speak. He simply watches. The older man continues his slow path through the village. His steps are steady, unchanged, as they have been all day. But the village around him now feels different again, quieter, more inward, as if everything is preparing for stillness. He pauses more often now. Not out of fatigue, but because the evening naturally encourages pause. At the cultivated field, the man has fully left his work behind. He walks along the edge of the village now, returning home in slow steps. The field remains behind him in quiet completion. The irrigation continues its steady movement, but no one is guiding it now. It does not need guidance. It has become part of the evening's quiet continuity. The plants stand under the fading light, their shapes now softened, blending gently into the colors of the approaching dusk. Back in the village, sounds are few. Very few. Footsteps are rare and careful. Voices are soft and brief, almost like whispers that dissolve quickly into the air. Even the wind feels quieter now. It passes through with a cooler touch than before, no longer warm from the day, but gently refreshing, signaling the transition toward night. Inside one home, the woman finishes her final small task. She does not immediately sit. She stands for a moment, looking out toward the doorway, where the last light of the day spills across the ground in a fading golden glow. She watches it for a while. Then slowly turns inward. The child remains still near the doorway, but now the light has shifted past him. The golden tones are fading, replaced by softer shades as the sun lowers further. He looks toward the horizon again, where the sky is now a deepening blend of orange and muted red. The older man pauses once more beneath shade. He looks across the village, which is now clearly in its evening form. Everything feels slower, softer, and more settled than at any other time of the day. Time here does not stop. But it no longer presses forward. It eases. The sky continues its transformation. The bright colors near the horizon deepen, while the upper sky begins to lose its light, turning into a calm, muted blue that slowly darkens with each passing moment. The desert reflects this change in a quiet way. No movement. Only colors shifting. Only light fading into stillness. The village begins to feel closer together, not in distance, but in presence. People remain near their homes now, fewer movements between spaces, more time spent in quiet completion of the day. The child finally stands and steps back into deeper shade. He does not go far. He simply settles where the light no longer reaches directly. The older man resumes his final slow walk through the village, as if marking the end of the day not through words, but through presence. Everything now feels like it is gently winding down. Not ending. Just softening. And as the sun finally touches the horizon in a last, quiet stretch of light, the desert village moves fully into evening, where the world begins to rest within the fading glow of day. Next part 30. Evening now settles fully across the village. The sun has nearly reached the horizon, and its final light spreads in long, fading ribbons of gold and soft orange. It no longer fills the sky. Instead, it rests along the edges of the world, as if gently holding onto the day for just a little longer before letting go. Everything feels quieter now. Not silent, but softened. Inside the village, movement becomes minimal. The final tasks of the day are complete, and what remains is only small adjustments, closing a space, placing something down, sitting for a moment longer before rest begins. There is no sense of urgency left anywhere. Only closure. The child now sits quietly in deepening shade. The light no longer reaches him directly. Around him, the world feels calmer, as if it has drawn closer into itself. He watches the horizon one more time, where the last brightness of the sun still lingers. He does not move much. Even his thoughts seem slower now. The older man continues his final walk through the village. His steps remain steady, unchanged, but the village itself feels different again. It is now fully within evening's presence, calm, reflective, and gently stilling. He passes homes where light is dimmer inside. He passes courtyards where movement has nearly stopped. Everything he sees feels familiar, but softened by the fading light. At the cultivated field, nothing moves now. The man who worked there earlier has fully returned and is no longer visible among the field rows. The irrigation continues its slow, unattended flow. The plants stand in quiet rows, now partially silhouetted against the fading glow of the sky. The field feels complete. Not finished in a final sense, but at rest. Back in the village, the sounds are almost gone. A few final footsteps. A soft closing of a doorway. A brief exchange of words that does not carry far. Even these sounds seem to dissolve quickly into the air, as if evening itself is absorbing them gently. The breeze returns once more. This time it is clearly cooler. It moves through the village with a calm presence, brushing across walls and paths, touching skin lightly, then continuing onward into the desert beyond. It carries the feeling of night approaching. Not suddenly, but steadily. Inside one home, the woman now sits quietly. She does not move for a while. She simply sits in the dimming light, watching the last glow of the day fade from the doorway. Her posture is still, her presence calm. There is nothing more to prepare. Only the transition into rest. The child now lies down again, this time not for sleep immediately, but for quiet stillness. He watches the ceiling or the faint outlines of the room as darkness slowly gathers around the edges. His breathing is calm, slower than before. The older man reaches a final resting place and stops walking. He stands for a moment, looking out across the village one last time. The light is now very low. Only traces of gold remain at the horizon, while the sky above has deepened into a soft, darkening blue. The village is nearly still. Not asleep, but no longer active. It exists in the quiet threshold between day and night. The sun disappears fully below the horizon. Not in a sudden moment, but in a slow, natural lowering, until even the last trace of light is gone. And in that moment, everything changes gently. The sky deepens. The desert cools. The village becomes quieter still. The child remains lying in calm stillness. The woman sits in soft darkness. The older man stands for a final moment before turning inward. And the desert village, now fully within evening, rests quietly under the first presence of night. Where the day has ended, and only stillness remains. Next part 31. Night arrives slowly, like a soft cloth being laid over the desert. It does not come with sound. It does not come with force. It simply spreads across the sky until the last traces of daylight are gone, and everything beneath it becomes quieter, darker, and more still. The village is no longer in the light of day. It is now held within night. The air has cooled. Not sharply, but gently, as if the heat of the day is finally letting go of the land. The sand, once warm underfoot, now feels calm and neutral, holding no urgency at all. Inside the homes, faint light begins to appear. Small sources of glow, subtle, steady, and soft, mark the transition into evening life. They do not brighten the rooms fully. They only shape the darkness gently, giving form to space without breaking its calm. The child remains lying down. His eyes are open for a while, adjusting to the low light inside the room. The edges of the ceiling, the faint outline of objects, the soft movement of shadow, all of it feels distant and calm. He does not move much. His body has fully accepted the stillness of the night. The woman sits nearby in quiet rest. Her day has ended in the same gentle way as it began, without interruption, without urgency. She remains seated for a time, her presence steady in the dim light, as if simply listening to the quietness around her. Outside, the village is almost completely still now. Movement has not stopped entirely, but it has reduced to rare and quiet moments. A faint step across a courtyard. A soft closing of a door. A low voice that fades quickly into the night air. Everything is careful. Everything is minimal. The older man stands for a final moment in the open space before turning inward. He looks across the village one last time under the darkening sky. The stars are beginning to appear, faint at first, scattered across the upper sky like distant points of memory returning slowly to view. The desert around the village is calm. No movement. Only quiet presence. The man finally turns and walks slowly into shade, disappearing into the softer darkness of the village. At the edge of the cultivated field, everything is still. The irrigation channels continue their gentle flow, now almost invisible in the darkness except for faint reflections of starlight on moving water. The plants stand silent under the night sky, unchanged in form, resting in their own quiet endurance. There is no work now. Only continuity. Only rest. The breeze returns again. This time it is cooler and more consistent. It moves through the village with a gentle steadiness, passing between homes, across open spaces, and into the wide desert beyond. It carries the feeling of night fully settled. Inside the homes, light remains low. People sit or lie in stillness, their movements reduced to the smallest necessary adjustments. Conversations are rare now, and when they happen, they are soft and brief. Silence becomes the main presence of the village. Not empty silence, but full silence. The child finally closes his eyes. His breathing slows into sleep, not sudden, but gradual, like sinking gently into water that holds him without resistance. The woman remains still for a while longer, then leans back into rest. The older man is no longer visible outside. He has returned fully into the quiet interior of night. Above the village, the sky deepens further. The last faint traces of evening color disappear, replaced by a wide expanse of dark blue and black, filled with steady, distant stars. The desert becomes almost invisible now, except for its presence as a vast, quiet shape beneath the sky. Everything has softened. Everything has slowed. The village no longer moves through the day. It rests within the night. And as the desert cools fully and the world settles into deep stillness, the quiet routine of the village continues. Not in motion, but in peace. And the story final part. Night settles completely now. There is no more trace of the sun, only the steady presence of stars scattered across a deep, quiet sky. They do not move in any way that can be seen. They simply exist distant, patient, unchanged. The desert is fully cool. The heat of the day has long faded, leaving the sand calm beneath the night air. Everything feels lighter now, as if the world has finally set down what it was carrying. The village rests. Inside the homes, there is only stillness. The child sleeps quietly, his breathing slow and even, his body fully relaxed into the safety of night. The woman rests beside the quiet space of her day, no longer moving, no longer preparing, only being. Others across the village are the same. Some asleep. Some in silent rest. All held gently within the same calm darkness. Outside, the paths are empty. Courtyards are still. Doors remain closed or slightly open, not out of urgency, but out of habit shaped by long, quiet years. The breeze moves softly through the village one last time. It passes over the sand, across the walls, between the narrow spaces where daylight once filled everything with heat and motion. Now it carries only coolness and silence. Then it fades. The older man, like all others, is no longer moving. His day has fully ended. There is nothing left to complete, nothing left to adjust. Only the quiet continuation of rest, shared by everything in the village. Above, the stars remain. Countless. Steady. Unhurried. They watch over the desert without change, as they always have, as they always will. The night deepens slightly, not into something heavier, but into something more complete. A deeper calm. A wider stillness. The village does not sleep as something ending. It sleeps as something continuing. Life does not stop here. It simply softens into another form of existence, one without movement, without noise, without need. Only presence. Only rest. Only time passing gently, unnoticed. And in that quiet desert night, the village remains beneath the stars. Calm. Still. And peaceful. As everything finally rests.